Actually, with large parts of the country dry and fine, but we'll have a few more showers tomorrow over southern Scotland and northern England. And then again, we look down to the south and the west, where further bands of heavy, thundery showers track northwards. So you'll be lucky to have a completely dry day tomorrow. These downpours, again, like to be quite heavy. Some welcome rain, obviously, across the Midlands and eastern parts of England. And we are going to see more downpours here as we head through Tuesday evening. That band of rain also extending further across North Wales and into Northern Ireland. So as I said, I think we'll all see some bursts of rain over the next couple of days, and really for the rest of this week, with that low pressure continuing to dominate. Yes, there'll be spells of sunshine at times, but we'll all see some heavy showers as well. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and a very warm welcome to our brand new early afternoon show, GB Newsday, with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. Well, finally, after what feels like decades, the Conservative Party leadership contest will formally come to an end, with results expected at 12:30.
So we'll be bringing you coverage all day live here on GB News on what promises to be a momentous day in British politics. But before that, the latest news headlines with Rosie.
A very good afternoon. It's just 2 minutes past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The new Conservative leader will be announced in just under half an hour, who then will become the next country's Prime Minister. After weeks of campaigning, Liz Truss, who's widely tipped to win the vote, and Rishi Sunak will finally learn who'll be given the keys to number 10. The priority for the new Prime Minister will be the cost of living crisis. Ms Truss is reportedly considering a freeze on energy bills. Well, the MP Mark Harper has been backing Rishi Sunak, but he says the party should support whoever wins.
I want the parliamentary party to come behind Liz if she wins today. I'm sure she'll be very conscious of the fact that in the MP rounds of this contest, she got about a third of Conservative MPs supporting her. So she'll be wanting to get Conservative MPs behind her so that as she deals with difficult issues this winter, and she's not going to get much of a gap. It's going to have to be announcing that energy package very soon, that people can unite behind her, and it's a team process.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says action on energy price rises needs to be taken now.
Yes, we want an energy freeze. It's vital for families and households across the country. So I want to see that happen. There's no justification for an incoming Prime Minister not doing it because the political will is there across the political parties. The question now will be who's going to pay for it. And we say that's a choice. It should be the oil and gas companies who've made those excess profits over the course of the last few months.
Well, the new Prime Minister will formally be appointed by the Queen at Balmoral tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. We've got full coverage of the leadership contest here on GB News. Now for some other pieces of information today. 4 men have been arrested in connection with the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool in the past 24 hours. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman as he chased his intended target into her home last month. Her mother was also injured. A 34-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and 3 others have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. The High Court's been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. It's hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to the country. The Home Office, which is trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, says Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure. The latest figures show more than 2,000 people crossed the English Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have crossed so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. Police in Canada are hunting for 2 men suspected of killing 10 people in a wave of stabbings in Saskatchewan. The suspects, named as Damien and Miles Sanderson, are accused of launching attacks across 13 crime scenes. At least 15 other people were injured. Police say it appears some of the victims were targeted and others stabbed at random. The RAC is saying that petrol drivers continue to get a raw deal at the pumps, despite a record drop in the price of petrol last month. They say average forecourt prices dropped over 12 pence to 169.8 pence per litre at the end of August. That's the largest monthly fall since records began. But the car company says current wholesale prices mean consumers should be paying around 161 pence per litre. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will make their first public appearance in the UK since they returned for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They're heading to Manchester today for the One Young World Summit. It's an event bringing together young leaders from more than 190 countries. Well, their security here is under scrutiny. The Duke's currently bringing legal action against the Home Office after a ruling that Harry couldn't pay for police protection for him and his family when they're here in the UK. This is GB News. We'll bring you it all as it happens.
Welcome. It's been 67 days since Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister, and in the next 25 minutes, the new leader of the Conservative Party will be revealed.
Yes, it's Liz Truss and, of course, and Rishi Sunak battling it out since the Conservative MPs voted for them to be the final 2 candidates, with the final decision put to some 160,000 Conservative Party members.
After 12 hustings and relentless campaigning across the country, it is finally time for us to find out who our next Prime Minister will be. Well, now we can cross over to Westminster and speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. I think we can see Darren there. Darren, you're right in the centre of it. How long do we have to wait? What happens next?
Literally 30 minutes. We're expecting an announcement, Gloria, at 12:37 on the dot. That will be from Sir Graham Brady. However, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be taken into a room here at the QE2 Centre in central London in the next 10 minutes or so, and they'll be told privately who has won this race. But that public announcement, as I say, coming at 12:37, and after 60-odd days, weeks and weeks of campaigning, it seemed like endless campaigning at times. The stage is finally set, and in fact you can just see Sir Graham Brady maybe there in the distance. The people who've gathered here today really are Conservative MPs, many of the supporters, of course, of Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, along with some Conservative members to hear this result. So there are dozens of MPs in in here. I spotted James Cleverly there in the distance, actually. Currently Education Secretary. He is the man tipped to take over from Liz Truss as Foreign Secretary if indeed she wins this race. Is she going to win it? Well, you'd have to say almost certainly she will. There will be an awful lot of egg, maybe an entire omelette on all of our faces if she doesn't. The real expectation is that she will become the new Conservative leader and the new Prime Minister tomorrow. Of course, she doesn't actually take over as Prime Minister until tomorrow. There's a whole series of different events taking place then when Boris Johnson will travel up to Balmoral to see the Queen to tender his resignation. Liz Truss will also travel up where she will be asked to form a new government.
As you say, it's expected that she will be selected, but how important are the numbers? Because this is, a rump of 160,000 party members rather than the MPs. Does she really need to have a very strong majority there to have the authority over her own party?
Yeah, I think it does, of course, clearly help. You only need, though, 50+1. It is a straightforward mandate. But yes, I think, like any leader, she would want a pretty strong majority, and I suspect she probably will get it, looking at the polling numbers that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. But you're right, and also pointed out, Mark, really interestingly, that while she may well have won this vote among Conservative members, and maybe probably quite substantially, actually a bigger number of Conservative MPs backed Rishi Sunak and not Liz Truss. And at the end of the day, it is a parliamentary democracy, and if Liz Truss wants to get things, sometimes pretty controversial things, legislation through the Commons in the days, weeks and months to come, she's going to have to rely on those Conservative MPs. And this is going to be a big challenge amongst an enormous in-tray for the incoming Prime Minister, is try and unite a pretty fractious Conservative party. It has been a pretty brutal campaign at times, it must be said, between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. There's an awful lot of blue-on-blue attacks between the two candidates. Clearly, many within the Rishi Sunak camp do not agree fundamentally with the economic course that Liz Truss wants to take. Now, Rishi Sunak has alluded to the fact that he is in the end willing to back her because she will be the new Prime Minister. But I think when the going gets tough, many of these MPs will feel pretty uncomfortable with some of the decisions Liz Truss is having to make or will have to make in the weeks to come. And how she manages that, how she manages the party over the next year, 2.5 years into that general election, that will be key to whether she can build a successful government.
Darren, our viewers and listeners will want to know what she's going to do about energy prices. How long will we have to wait before the new Prime Minister announces a support package?
I think pretty soon. It's going to happen pretty soon. You have to remember that even though this leadership race, Gloria, has been taking place over the last couple of months, in the last couple of weeks, effectively Liz Truss' team's been talking to lots of senior civil servants, lots of officials in different government departments have been having a whole series of meetings, essentially getting ready for government. And in that, they have started not just to draw up who is going to fill those cabinet posts, but also what they will do in the first couple of weeks. These couple of weeks are going to be crucial to set the narrative for Liz Truss' premiership. She's not really going to have, I would have thought, much of a honeymoon given the scale of the challenge she's likely to face, not just, of course, with those energy bills, but with the overall economic picture. I suspect we will see those tax reversals on national insurance happen pretty soon. She said she wanted to do it from day one. While we're not expecting an actual budget, we're told it's going to be more of a fiscal event, we could and we will then see, I think, more measures when it comes to tackling energy prices. Now, interestingly, Liz Truss has gone for most of this campaign talking about how she doesn't want to see handouts to try and help people with the energy bill, Gloria. But I think that's looking increasingly likely. Lots of suggestions at the weekend that we could well see a price freeze on energy bills. It's essentially been carried out in lots and lots of other European countries. That cap remains in place so that people will not have to pay extortionate bills this winter. Now, that poses lots and lots of problems, not least of all because it's going to be damn expensive for us, the taxpayers. It's going to rack up on top of the national debt, and also it might not suppress consumption that much, which might be necessary if we were to avoid any form of rationing, which Liz Truss has somewhat also ruled out. So yes, I think we are going to see some significant measures. It looks like it's going to be an energy price cap. much must be said mooted by the Labour Party, by Keir Starmer. But those decisions will come for other days. I think the other thing really to reflect on today is just what a big moment this is for Liz Truss personally. Someone who's been involved in politics for a very long time, since effectively she was a child. Very different politics, it must be said, from her parents, but someone who's been an MP for 12 years, has held different cabinet posts. She's the longest serving current cabinet minister. Someone who's had to battle away actually politically within the Conservative Party, has been written off many times, and yet in the next 20-30 minutes she will become the new Conservative leader, almost certainly, and on course to become Britain's third female Prime Minister.
We've just been trying to spot in the crowd there, as you've been speaking, Darren, the various big beasts, if you like, of the political jungle. And Nadeem Zahawi, we've seen James Cleverly. We haven't seen Kwasi Kwarteng as yet, who we understand will probably be her new Chancellor. Do we expect very much a double act, as we saw with George Osborne and with David Cameron, that they really will be a very closely linked number 10 and number 11 Downing Street?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, they're clearly very close political allies, it must be said, Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss. They've worked together quite a lot, and I suspect, yes, we will see a very close relationship between number 10 and number 11. I just saw Dominic Raab, actually, who I think has sat down, currently, of course, Deputy Prime Minister. He is not expected to survive as Deputy Prime Minister in this cabinet reshuffle. In fact, he may well not be in the cabinet at all. Mark. He's been very, very vociferously campaigning for Rishi Sunak and actually has attacked Liz Truss quite strongly throughout the campaign. There's Steve Baker, of course. He's been a very senior Conservative backbencher for a long time. Talking to Nadeem Zahawi, the current Chancellor. Nadeem Zahawi is expected to stay in the cabinet, but not as Chancellor, maybe possibly as Education Secretary. But, you know, for all the people who are going to gain in this race, Mark, in terms of the cabinet posts, there will those that will fall out of favour, of course, and fall out of cabinet all together. As I say, not just suggestions that Dominic Raab will be out, but also Rishi Sunak is, I think, unlikely to serve. Will Grant Shapps, for example, survive? It's going to be a really fascinating cabinet as well, because we're likely to see the three great ministries of state, that is Chancellor, Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary, actually, and then if you include the Prime Minister as well, actually not taken up by white men for the first time in the history of our country. So it is a big period of change for Britain. It's a big moment for Liz Truss. It's a big moment for the Conservative Party as well. Many people feel that she needs to get this right. It's going to be a very difficult 2.5 years, potentially ahead of an election, to get this right if the Conservative Party are going to remain in power. As I said, this is a pretty fractious party, a very divided party. Can she bring it together? Can she set out a narrative and convince the public that the Conservatives should win the next general election? It is a big, big mammoth task, a bigger task, I think, maybe even that Thatcher faced in '79. The big question is Liz Truss, is our next Prime Minister going to be up to the job?
Darren, for the moment, stay with us, of course, but we've got plenty to wait and listen for, as we've got some 15 minutes to go.
14.
Oh, 14, I'm counting. And 24 seconds.
Joining us in the studio now is GB News presenter Alistair Stewart. Alistair.
Hello. It's absolutely magnetic, isn't it? It's riveting.
If I can interrupt you for a second.
X Factor and the voice all rolled into one.
Three grey Range Rovers went through, and of course a lot of these runners and riders already have very senior jobs, even if they're going to be dispensed with. I found that conversation about the Michael Fabricants there,
yeah.
Great Boris Johnson cheerleader, about the Deputy Prime Minister role, crucial, because in the papers this morning, Therese Coffey is being widely tipped as effective Deputy Prime Minister. And it's lovely to read that for one very simple reason that you, Gloria, will particularly appreciate. It's about friendship. It's about loyalty.
Yeah.
Therese goes back a long way. There's Kwasi Kwarteng. And there's much speculation whether he's effectively the power behind the throne, or whether Jacob Rees-Mogg, who we also saw there and is tipped to be the business secretary,
to take over Kwasi Kwarteng's job. And of course, that would be the job where he's got to get the oil and gas companies on side to try and sign up to any kind of energy deal, because the expectation is she's going to say, we, the government, will cut the market rate as long as you decide to basically freeze prices, i.e. a government guarantee for gas and electricity prices.
Well, and there's Tom Tugendhat, who didn't quite make it, but has put a marker down, tipped to be the Security Minister attending Cabinet. Tom turning up there. You're absolutely right. It was Kwasi as Business Secretary who met round table with the energy giants, and in effect, the energy giants said, do whatever you like, but you're going to have to pay us. Because we're still going to have to pay whoever it is, whether it's Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, or even Russia, to a lesser extent, that going price. And we can't go broke because we fund about a quarter of the UK
and we have
industry.
to honour all our commitments, of course, when we do these deals. We can't sort of not pay up at the end of the day.
What I was interested in, Alistair, is that you're a veteran. You've interviewed loads of Prime Ministers. If Liz Truss, as we expect, will become the 56th Prime Minister. You haven't interviewed all 56, to be fair to you. But you had a sit-down with Liz Truss. You did that for us here at GB News. Did you learn anything about her style and how she does things and how she engaged with the audience and with yourself during that interview that might give us some lessons into what sort of Prime Minister she might be?
Yes, I mean, two things, one of which is it's slightly vainglorious of me, but when we turned up for the People's Forum in Lee, which I so enjoyed, she did it, and Rishi in the end wasn't able to do it, which I thought, there's Damien Green. He's a man who has been a former Deputy Prime Minister.
Senior party figure,
he's crucial for the left of the party, and even the Conservative Party.
What is called the One Nation.
That's exactly right. But to go back to Liz, when we met privately, in the ante-room before going in to do the programme, she asked me what I'd made of the campaign up to that point. And I won't tell you what I said to her, but I will tell you one thing. I said I was very surprised that I hadn't heard from either of you that old Conservative mantra about the size of the state. How big should the state be? What should its ambitions be? Because in Margaret Thatcher's day, if it got more than about 35, 36%, they really panicked. And Rishi Sunak in his Mays lecture said, it's 50% now, that is far too big. She listened quietly. We had a brief conversation about that. And then when we did the Manchester hustings, it became a big and important part of her pitch. And I respected that and I admired that. I also think, putting it quite bluntly now, she is better than with ordinary folk than Rishi is. I hugely admire Rishi's intellect, whether it was at Goldman Sachs in the old days or in government in recent times. But I do genuinely believe that Liz has got the common touch. And in British politics, that matters enormously.
And it's the party members, not the MPs, that are voting the leader in this, 12 minutes now to go, this vote that we're about to see at the QE2. But let's not forget that we've still got a Prime Minister in situ, Boris Johnson, outside number 10 for us. Tom has been following events there in Downing Street. Tom, do we know where and what, indeed, Boris Johnson is doing today?
Yes, we've had it confirmed that Boris Johnson is indeed working in Downing Street today. In fact, he's got a bit of a busy schedule, a surprisingly busy schedule for his last full day as Prime Minister. Later on this afternoon, he has a scheduled call with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, someone, of course, who's become a close ally and, dare I say it, friend of the Prime Minister in the last few years. Well, that will likely be his final call of an international level as Prime Minister. But yes, we have been told that Boris Johnson is working in Downing Street today. When we asked the Prime Minister's official spokesman whether the Prime Minister will be watching this event at the QE2 Centre, will be seeing this event announcing his successor, we were not given an answer. So we're not yet sure whether Boris Johnson will be watching along with us this announcement in just a few minutes' time or not. But what we do know is he is working in Downing Street, and also we do know that he will be giving his last speech as Prime Minister from this street tomorrow morning. That's before he flies up to Balmoral and officially resigns as Prime Minister, tendering his resignation to the Queen, who then immediately will see his successor. The kissing of hands will take place, and his successor will fly back down to London to give their first speech as Prime Minister tomorrow afternoon, again from the steps of Downing Street. So following that, there'll of course be the cabinet appointments, and this street will really become a flurry of activity, with many famous faces walking up and down, being ready to be given their jobs. And
Tom, I'm just going to interrupt you because we're just seeing a very interesting shot from inside the QE2. Dominic Raab in quite detailed conversation with Nadhim Zahawi, and we're expecting Dominic Raab basically to be removed from the equation. Is that right?
Yes, well, these two individuals are, of course, senior backers of rival camps. Dominic Raab early declared for Rishi Sunak, has been an effusive supporter of Rishi Sunak through this process. And Nadhim Zahawi was, of course, a candidate in the early stages himself before chucking in his lot with Liz Truss and becoming one of Liz Truss's vocal proponents. Of course, these two men remain in cabinet but supporting different candidates, and it is expected that Nadhim Zahawi will get a job. He's been loyal to Liz Truss. He's seen as being on the sort of Thatcherite right of the Conservative Party and has been helping with her campaign as well, whilst serving as Chancellor over the last 2 months. Whereas there is wide speculation that Dominic Raab, of course, currently Deputy Prime Minister, will be out of the cabinet, that his loyalty to Rishi Sunak and lack of support for Liz Truss will be returned in kind.
Liz Truss and I got elected to Parliament at the same time, back in 2010. That was David Cameron, George Osborne. The political debate was all about balancing the books, about austerity, about living within your means. Has that debate gone forever?
I think the fundamentals of the time that we are now living in has changed the calculation on that. The argument in terms of balancing the books back in 2010 was about shoring up the UK's position internationally. Compared to other countries around the world, the UK had a significant debt and deficit, similar levels to Greece, Portugal, Italy, Spain, far away removed from some of the more prosperous countries. And the big challenge that government saw, at least through the lens of Cameron Osborne, was that getting that deficit down and balancing the books was crucial in terms of getting the UK seen as a credible investment opportunity internationally and keeping the cost of our borrowing and the cost of our debt low. The fundamental change now that some people in the Conservative Party see is that because all countries have been whacked to a similar degree by the COVID crisis, because all countries have been plunged into a supreme level of debt, the sort of level of debt that you'd only really see at wartime, because of that change in circumstance, some people now argue, or at least the Liz Truss campaign argues, that balancing the books so soon becomes less of a political calculation. If all advanced economies are moving at a similar pace, suddenly the competitive advantage of having a lower deficit and debt becomes less. So Liz Truss during this campaign has pointed to the fact that the UK deficit is actually in a better place than many of our comparable economies in the G7, and the idea of the Truss campaign is to pay it back over a longer period of time, as the likes of Canada, the US, Japan are doing, doesn't seem like such a bad position comparatively internationally, whereas it would have done in 2010.
Tom, we're just seeing pictures of Therese Coffey towards the front of the audience, and she is being greeted by many people. Again, suggestion she may be effectively Deputy Prime Minister or at least Health Secretary. That's the other role that's been outlined for her. But I'm going to ask Gloria a question on behalf of our viewers and listeners.
Oh, my goodness.
Having come into Parliament at the same time, did you have any inkling that Liz Truss was prime ministerial material when you came in together?
No. But I'm not sure you ever can spot it. The only signs that I saw of ambition, so there are many, famously, bars in the Commons, so you will, you know, well, I would pop in the bars with my mates. And I think, so Liz Truss you would see in the bars,
yes.
Neither of us were drinking heavily or anything, it's just, frankly, somewhere to
Collegiate,
go when you're
yes,
waiting for late night votes. And I always thought she's operating.
Right.
So she's building base, she's making alliances. So whereas I was being useless, if you want to, just talking to my mates, I mean, that's no way to go about
She was
getting
out
on.
on manoeuvres.
I could see her making alliances and forming alliances.
Yeah. Alistair, from what you learned talking and seeing her, do you think she will be a Thatcherite leading from the front or more collegiate in terms of the way
I'd take a deep breath and say something which I hope folk may reflect upon, and that is she's going to redefine what being a Thatcherite is. We know perfectly well that one of the early quite profound debates between Mr Sunak and Liz Truss was who's the Thatcherite?
Yeah.
And anyone who's studied these matters and anyone who was there at the time knows the truth of the matter is that Rishi was the Thatcherite. Because if you look at Thatcher and Geoffrey Howe from 79 to the mid-80s, it was defeat inflation first and then big bumper tax cuts under Nigel Lawson, but not until about 86.
Yeah.
The idea of saying such is the mess, as Tom was just saying a moment ago, whether it's the cost of the Ukraine war, whether it's the cost of living crisis, energy, and all the rest of it, we're in such a set of circumstances now that it makes the winter of discontent look like peanuts. We're going to rewrite the book. And that's what she's offering to do. Whether it will work or not, that's what we're here to watch.
Let's not forget she's got Sir Patrick Minford, who was one of Thatcher's economic gurus, on side as well.
Yeah, so. And with all due respect to Patrick, also Gerald Lyons, who was a theoretician in those days, but then went into the city and did frightfully well. Have I got just 10 seconds very, very quickly?
You have as long as you want.
We also saw in that three-shot that you were both talking about so well, where it was Nadine and then in the middle, staring into the distant, cold future, Dominic Raab. Sitting on Dominic's left was Ben Wallace, the Secretary of State for Defence, who everybody is saying is keeping his job. He was tipped to run and beat both of them. He didn't.
And we will never know whether that happens. What struck me, because I'm familiar with these sorts of events, I don't know if you noticed, on the front row, there are white pieces of paper on those seats.
Yes.
They are reserved.
Ah.
Now, what we don't know yet, we can't quite see that front row yet. We don't know who they are reserved for.
Is
it the cabinet? Is it the family of both the candidates? Those are the sort of figures that you will see on the front row. It was quite interesting, given what you just said, Alistair, that Ben Wallace is not there. So if as you say,
I think
he
the
remains in
partners
the
thing
cabinet.
is also quite interesting, and a number of people have observed that Mr Truss, I know it's not his name, I can't remember what his surname is, that's inverse sexism of me, but hardly featured. In the Sunday papers, there were a few pictures of him. He's a big player in the city, big finance director. Whereas Rishi, unusually for modern politics, has had his wife, who is potentially damaging as a story, front and centre.
Indeed.
Makes great pride of the fact that he refers to his brilliant teenage daughters as his light guide on climate change and things like that. Rishi's put family front and centre.
And of course,
Liz has kept it in the background.
Yeah, the whole business of growing up in Southampton and having that sort of working class background.
Yes, it was a chemist, wasn't it?
Yeah, I never visited myself.
But Rishi did take the mickey out of himself at the Manchester House thing, saying, as you may have heard.
and Liz Truss is the good, comprehensive girl, of course. So obviously, they were told, right, now, are we starting to get the riders as Graham Brady?
Sir Graham Brady is the chairman of the 1922 committee, which is the committee of backbench Conservative members of Parliament.
Let's cross live.
Good afternoon. Today marks the culmination of the Conservative leadership election. It's been a huge honour to be co-chairman of our party, working alongside Ben Elliott. And I'm hugely proud of the way everyone has worked together to deliver this contest, which has shown the Conservative Party to be in good voice and good strength. We've held 12 regional hustings, the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, attended by 20,000 party members. It's been a long campaign. 20,000 party members and watched online by over 2.5 million members of the public. The members' hustings involved our two fantastic candidates undergoing 14 hours of questioning and taking more than 600 questions from party members. And these hustings were in addition to the multiple online hustings and the media interviews. This concluded last Wednesday with a fantastic event at the Wembley Arena, attended by 6,000 party members. I'd like to pay tribute to Darren Mott and the dedicated team at CCHQ for running the membership ballot. I'd also like to thank my parliamentary colleagues for their support throughout the process, and in particular members of the 1922 executive, ably led by Sir Graham Brady, who has been the returning officer throughout the process. But most of all, I'd like to thank our party members who've undertaken the solemn duty of choosing our next leader and our next Prime Minister. Our members have engaged constructively, positively and thoughtfully in the process, whilst also keeping busy getting our message out across the United Kingdom, something I've seen at the 87 constituency associations I've campaigned with in the last few weeks. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to our outgoing leader and Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. His leadership through Brexit, through the pandemic, and now through the war in Ukraine was never going to be easy, but time and again he rose to the challenge and delivered for our country. It is now essential that we come together as a party and unite behind our new leader and our new Prime Minister to continue Our new Prime Minister will build on the outgoing Prime Minister's legacy and continue to deliver prosperity, opportunity and security for everyone. So with no further ado, will you please warmly welcome our two fantastic candidates, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. And ladies and gentlemen, to announce the result of our leadership election, please welcome our returning officer, Sir Graham Brady.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. On the 7th of July, the Prime Minister announced his resignation as leader of our party. The 1922 committee then organised 5 ballots over an 8-day period, concluding the part of the leadership election for which we have responsibility, and putting forward the candidates to the National Convention and CCHQ for the programme of hustings all over the United Kingdom and the ballot of the membership that is now concluded. I worked closely with the board of the party, CCHQ and Civica Electoral Services to ensure that all qualifying members had the opportunity to vote and to ensure that our ballot was secure as well as free and fair. I'd like to thank the 1922 executive, and in particular my fellow officers, Naz Ghani, Will Ragg, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Bob Blackman and Gary Sambrook, and our staff for all of their help and support, especially during the administration of the parliamentary rounds of voting. I would like to thank the party board and staff for all their hard work organising the hustings, which allowed so many members to see the candidates in action, whether in person or online. I'm grateful to CES for the professionalism with which they have dealt with the ballot in distributing, collecting and counting the votes, both online and by post. Finally, I want to thank all the party members who have taken this responsibility very seriously, all the candidates who put themselves forward for election, and in particular my colleagues Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, who ran such excellent campaigns in the full glare of media scrutiny and who showed themselves to be outstanding candidates to be the leader of our party. Now the result. I, Sir Graham Brady, the returning officer for the Conservative and Unionist Party leadership election, declare that the total number of eligible voters was 172,437. The turnout in the election was 82.6%. The total number of votes rejected was 654. The total number of valid votes given to each candidate was as follows. Rishi Sunak, 60,399. Liz Truss, 81,326. Therefore, I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. We'll come up on stage.
Well, thank you, Sir Graham. It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman, and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, my political colleagues, and all of those who helped on this campaign. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support. I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates, particularly Rishi Sunak. It's been a hard-fought campaign. I think we have shown the depth and breadth of talent in our Conservative Party. I also want to thank our outgoing leader, my friend, Boris Johnson. Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle. Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country. this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And my friends, we need to show that we will deliver over the next 2 years. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. And I will deliver on the National Health Service. But we all will deliver for our country. And I will make sure that we use all the fantastic talents of the Conservative Party, our brilliant members of Parliament and peers, our fantastic councillors, our MSs, our MSPs, all of our councillors and activists and members right across our country. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
There we have it, as expected. Liz Truss is leader of the Conservative Party and from tomorrow, our next Prime Minister.
Let's just remind you of the votes that we just heard from Sir Graham Brady, the returning officer for Liz Truss, 81,326. Rishi Sunak, 60,399. That's from an 82.6% vote of the 172,000 odd party members. Remember, this is where the constituency is for this leadership, not the MPs, but clearly a substantial majority there for Liz Truss.
About 57% to 43%. Oh, we're going to cross live now to Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, who is in the room. Just describe the atmosphere there, the feeling, what's happening in the room that Liz Truss has just been announced, the new Conservative leader.
Well, really interesting, isn't it? Isn't it really interesting, Gloria? We could tell, even from this distance, because she walked in at the very far end, when you saw her face when she walked in that room, you could tell she had won this leadership race. This is a fight that she's had over the last, couple of months to get those Conservative members on board. It is something she's wanted to do pretty much for most, certainly, of her adult life. And yet here she is as the new Conservative leader. She will be our new Prime Minister tomorrow. Just a reflection on a couple of things. First of all, when you break down that vote into actual percentage terms, it was Liz Truss 57%, Rishi Sunak 43%. Now, I have to say, that is much closer, I think, than anyone had really thought it would be, that had predicted. It's, I think, 9 points closer than Jeremy Hunt got with Boris Johnson 3 years ago. And so I think Rishi Sunak's team will be pretty happy in some regards with that, given those predictions, though, as Mark was pointing out, in the end, it was still pretty emphatic. I mean, it wasn't that close, but it was closer than we thought. And also, just a reminder that Liz Truss is not going to change tack in all of this. She said during her speech, didn't she, that she campaigned as a Conservative and that she will govern as a Conservative, but suggested and alluded to in this speech just the difficult decisions that are going to have to be made in the coming weeks, whether that is on energy prices, whether that is on trying to steer the economy, which is expected to enter a prolonged recession at the end of this year, or whether it is also dealing with the National Health Service, which is not in a great state post-pandemic, not in a great state heading into what will be a very difficult winter. So it is fascinating that these Conservative members and MPs have finally, after what felt like a very long campaign, had their say. This, though, for Liz Truss is only the beginning. It is not the end. She will go to Balmoral tomorrow to see the Queen, and she will become our 56th Prime Minister, ticking over from Boris Johnson.
A lot of questions from viewers and listeners, Darren, as to when we get this energy plan, when we get the numbers and how it's going to be paid for. Clearly, she's got to put a cabinet in place, and we are expecting Kwasi Kwarteng as the Chancellor for that, with what we are being told is a fiscal event, probably an emergency budget. But clearly, this week, she has got to get those numbers out to the public to try and reassure everybody.
Yeah, this is going to be a crucial week for Liz Truss. First of all, she's going to appoint a cabinet tomorrow evening after she returns from Scotland. Again, that will be really, really important. Really important, not just for you and I and everyone else watching this, but also for managing this party. You may well have heard during some of the speeches calls fundamentally to try and unite the Conservative Party. This is a party that's had a pretty fractious election campaign, has had the chucking out of a Prime Minister that many of them didn't want to see leave at all in Boris Johnson. Can she bring that party together? That's going to be a really, really crucial issue. Remember, Rishi Sunak won more Conservative MPs in that final leadership ballot in Parliament than Liz Truss did. Then you're right, also she's going to have to start out on these tax cuts that she promised, reversing that national insurance rise. She's promised that she wants to cut taxes from day one, so you would expect that would come pretty soon. But the big question is, how far will she go on energy prices? And it's fair to say that she's been on a bit of a journey during this campaign. It did start with the fact that she didn't want to see any handouts. She thought cutting taxes was the way of dealing with the impending energy crisis this winter. Somewhat, I think, seeing the sheer scale of what the country faces means that we will see tax cuts and also further help, almost certainly a type of price freeze, a cap on how much we will be charged for energy this coming winter. They have been talking to the energy companies over the last couple of weeks. Her campaign, Kwasi Kwarteng, as you say, who has been Energy Secretary and almost certainly next Chancellor, has been involved in those talks. So it will be fascinating to see where we get the detail on this, how it's going to be paid for, because these are still very, very difficult decisions. They're going to be very costly. They're going to add to our national debt at a time in which sterling is under an awful lot of pressure because of concerns about rising debt. And also, what will it do to consumption? Because there is a feeling that not only do prices have to be cut this autumn and winter in order to manage this energy crisis, but consumption might have to be moderated as well. If you've got a price cap, will that moderate consumption? Maybe not. Liz Truss has already ruled out any form of rationing, and that is why it's going to be a very, very difficult couple of weeks, and why these weeks are crucial for setting the narrative of her premiership, of which she alluded to the fact that we're not probably likely to see an election for 2 years. So this is really going to be a crucial couple of weeks, given the fact that she's also not likely really to have very much of a honeymoon period.
Darren, thank you.
Fascinating point during the acceptance speech that you and I both went, oh, because we remembered exactly. I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative, which was Tony Blair's mantra in '97 in Downing Street.
Outside the Royal Festival Hall.
Absolutely,
in fact,
right.
As he became victorious in 1997.
But she also, just picking off the back of what Darren was saying there about tax cuts and the policy, I thought really explosive and below the belt to Rishi Sunak is I will re-embrace the manifesto upon which we were elected in 2019, which said we will not raise taxes. Not only will she not raise taxes, she will cut taxes. So day one, from the victory podium, I'm a Conservative, and this is what being a Conservative means going forward.
I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow the economy.
Yeah, so and don't forget in that manifesto also, that was the British Bill of Rights, lots of very interesting stuff. Dig out your manifestos,
Let's cross over to Downing Street now, where Tom Harwood is there for us. Tom, as expected, Liz Truss wins the day. Now, she has to assemble a cabinet, and this is actually really difficult for new leaders. How many of your friends and allies do you have in those top jobs? And how many of those who are more sceptical do you bring in to genuinely unite what has been a fractured party during this contest?
Yes, it's a tricky decision to make, a tightrope in many ways to walk. Margaret Thatcher, when she became Prime Minister in 1979, really maintained a similar sort of the similar team that she had in her shadow cabinet, many of whom were inherited from Ted Heath. And then it took several years for her to purge the so-called wets, those on the left of the party, from her cabinet, which happened over time. The question is whether a new Prime Minister wants to start looking more magnanimous, wants to start having that broad brush, broad church appeal of a cabinet, or if they want a team that basically is all on the same page, all agree, and therefore potentially could make decisions more quickly. With a large majority, it's easy to see how that might be more tempting. And certainly looking at the various reports and rumours that have been swirling around a Truss premiership, it does look like this will overwhelmingly be a cabinet of allies. Those names that have been floated around for the top jobs, the so-called great offices of state, the Treasury, the Home Department, and indeed the Foreign Office. All of these posts are rumoured to go to allies of Liz Truss. Not only allies in terms of friendships, but allies in terms of ideology as well. Kwasi Kwarteng, as we were discussing earlier, tipped to be the next Chancellor. He has known Liz Truss very well since they both got elected in 2010, wrote a book together, has been a key ally in her leadership campaign, likely to be moving into number 11 from tomorrow evening. Equally, James Cleverly, now tipped to be Foreign Secretary. He served as a Foreign Office Minister under Liz Truss. He's now Education Secretary, has previously sat in Cabinet as Chairman of the Conservative Party, seen to not only be an early backer of Liz Truss, but also someone on the Thatcherite right of the party, someone who's an ideological ally of Liz Truss as well. And then, of course, Home Secretary, likely to be Suella Braverman. Now, she ran a brief leadership campaign of her own before being knocked out in the early MP rounds and endorsing Liz Truss, now tipped to be Home Secretary. Someone from the Brexit right of the Conservative Party, a Spartan, so-called, because she voted against all of the potential Brexit deals under Theresa May 3 times, but also someone who is economically to the right as well, believes in cutting taxes and all the rest of it. It looks like loyalty will be rewarded in Liz Truss's cabinet, but we don't have long to wait. The way that things are going is that Liz Truss will return from Balmoral to Downing Street tomorrow afternoon and begin those cabinet appointments pretty much straight away.
Not long to wait. Tom Howard in Downing Street, thanks. Speak to you in a bit.
Let's head back into the QE2 conference centre where the vote has taken place in this last half hour. Darren is still there for us. And Tom, running through some of the runners and riders there for the possible new cabinet. Brandon Lewis, one of the names that's also been mentioned as well, Darren.
Indeed, and the merry man, Brandon Lewis, stands right next to me inside the QE2 Centre. Of course, former Northern Ireland Secretary, backed Liz Truss during this campaign. Much talked about as returning to the cabinet in a different position as early as tomorrow. First of all, your reaction to that result. I was just saying, I think it was a little bit closer than we had expected, but still an emphatic victory for
an emphatic victory for Liz Truss. I think pretty much in line generally with where our membership the percentages tend to be around that kind of figure for all of the leadership elections going back to even 2001. So a very good clear majority for Liz Truss, and I think gives us a very clear message now. The party has taken its view, it's given its decision. We now come back together, get behind the leader of the party and next Prime Minister and get on with delivering for people.
I mean, I do want to look forward a little bit, but just let's look back first. I mean, this election campaign went for so long, didn't it? You know, people quite worried about what's going to happen this autumn, winter. It's quite introspective for the Conservative Party to spend so long deciding who the new leader should be.
I hesitate to say it, but there'd be people like yourself criticising us if we did it too quickly. This is a big decision. We want to get round the whole country. Look, as somebody I was chairman of the party and organised the 2019 leadership campaign. You've got to organise the hustings all over the country, give members a chance to put their questions, give the candidates the chances to answer those questions, both at the live events, online events. So it does take a bit of time, and I think a decision like this, it's right that we take the time for the members to have the chance to get it right.
In saying that, those decisions are going to have to be made, but they're going to be difficult decisions, and they're going to be divisive decisions. Can Liz Truss unite this party? Many didn't want to see Boris Johnson go. Many of Rishi Sunak's supporters think some of her economic plans are pretty mad.
I think she can. Look, one of the strengths of our party has always been that we are such a big, wide tent of ideas and personalities. We've got a new leader. We come together now. We get behind that leader. Look, I think we'll see in the next week or so Liz and her new Chancellor, when they're appointed, putting forward a package of measures that people recognise are going to make a positive difference, a real difference, in a way that we can all get behind and make sure we're helping people across the country.
Are we looking at an energy price cap?
Well, look, I'm not going to predict. I think we're wrong. It's market sensitive. We haven't had the fiscal event yet. As you know, it's always wrong to prejudge.
Is it in principle a bad idea?
I think in principle what we've got to do is make sure we are affecting the challenges to people's pockets, those cost of living challenges they're facing today, whilst, as Liz Truss has outlined just a few moments ago, dealing with the longer term supply issues, so we're able to be more resistant to these issues in the future as well.
And just very finally, are you hoping to return back to the Cabinet?
Well, look, we all serve at the pleasure of a Prime Minister. I've been very fortunate to have a long ministerial career. We'll see what the new Prime Minister has in store and what they want to do with the country and for their government.
Brendan Lewis, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll have to wait and see what job he gets, Mark. That could happen, as I say, well, it will happen as early as tomorrow when we find out who the Cabinet posts are. We have also got Penny Mordaunt next to me, talking to someone else, and we might try and grab her in a couple of minutes, but I'll hand you back to the studio while we do.
Yes, please grab her as soon as you can, because you're watching GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst, and also Gloria.
Truss has just been announced as the Conservative leader.
81,326 to remind you, 60,399 to Rishi Sunak.
57% she secured.
Yeah. Slightly more or slightly less.
It was decisive, I still think.
21,000 majority, that will do. And, of course, still only as the leader of the Conservative Party, still not Prime Minister, Boris Johnson is still there in position till tomorrow.
And, Alistair, just tell us briefly, if you would, tomorrow will be a different way of announcing our Prime Minister, in the sense that we normally have the cameras going over to Buckingham Palace. That's not going to happen tomorrow, is it?
Totally different, and absolutely rightly, entirely for Her Majesty's convenience. She's not well, we all know that. Mobility is the issue. What we don't know is whether they'll save the planet and fly up together, which could be an interesting flight, or whether they'll go separately. But certainly Boris Johnson returns the great seals of state, as it were, to Her Majesty, who then kisses hands with Liz Truss, who will be her 15th Prime Minister. That woman, her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill.
You're not suggesting one will be in business class and the other in economy, will you?
Well, I tell you, if I was British Airways, I'd upgrade her.
Anyway, that's all to come tomorrow, but we've had the vote, just to remind you, in this last half hour. So Liz Truss will be the new leader of the Conservative Party now, and the potential Prime Minister, with that kissing of the hand, as they say, tomorrow in Balmoral.
Time to get the latest headlines now at 1 o'clock with Rosie Wright.
A very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Liz Truss has won the Conservative Party leadership contest and will become the country's next Prime Minister. She took more than 81,000 votes in what she described as a hard-fought campaign against Rishi Sunak, who finished with just over 60,000. The new Tory leader promised to cut taxes, grow the economy, deliver on the energy crisis and the NHS. Well, she'll travel to Balmoral tomorrow, where the Queen will officially appoint her as Prime Minister.
I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country.
The Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she'll seek to build a good working relationship with Liz Truss. The Labour leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, says the incoming Prime Minister doesn't have the right priorities.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households. And that shows not only that she's out of touch, but that she's not on the side of working people. So she needs to deal with the cost of living crisis, she needs to deal with the fact the NHS is on its knees, and she needs to deal with the collapse of law and order.
We'll have continued analysis here on GB News. In other news now, the High Court's been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. Well, they're hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Home Office, which is trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, says the country's fundamentally safe and secure. More than 2,000 people crossed the Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have crossed so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. 4 men have been arrested in connection with the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool in the past 24 hours. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman as he chased his intended target into her home last month. Her mother was also injured. A 34-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and 3 others have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. Police in Canada are hunting for 2 men suspected of killing 10 people in a wave of stabbings in Saskatchewan. The suspects, named as Damien and Miles Sanderson, are accused of launching attacks across 13 crime scenes. At least 15 other people were injured. Police say it appears some victims were targeted, others were stabbed at random. The RAC are saying that petrol drivers continue to get a raw deal at the pumps, despite a record drop in the price of petrol last month. They say average forecourt prices dropped over 12 pence to 169.8 pence per litre at the end of August. That's the largest monthly fall since records began. But the car company says current wholesale prices mean consumers should be paying around 161 pence per litre. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will make their first public appearance in the UK since they returned here for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Well, they're heading to Manchester for the One Young World Summit. It's an event that brings together young leaders from more than 190 countries. Their security here is under scrutiny. The Duke is currently bringing legal action against the Home Office after a ruling that Harry couldn't pay for police protection for him and his family when they're here in the UK. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens.
Rosie, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our brand new programme, GB Newsday, where it's been finally confirmed that we have a brand new leader of the Conservative Party, yes, Liz Truss, who will, of course, be the next Prime Minister after that result of the leadership race was announced in her favour just a few minutes ago.
She won with 57.3% of the vote to Rishi Sunak's 42.7%. We can cross over now to Westminster and speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He is with Conservative MP Liz Truss backer Steve Baker. Darren, over to you.
Yeah, very good afternoon, Gloria. As you say, we've got a new Conservative leader, Liz Truss. Not a new Prime Minister, though. She takes over that role tomorrow when she travels up to Scotland to form a new government, to be asked by the Queen to form a new government. We're expecting to hear from her in Downing Street late tomorrow afternoon. And then she'll appoint a new cabinet. Then there's PMQs, and then some of the big decisions have to be made on economy, taxation, energy prices. It is not going to be a very easy week for Liz Truss, but she will be our new Prime Minister. Let's speak to a person, as you say, who backed Liz Truss in this election, Steve Baker. Your reaction to the results?
I'm very pleased that Liz has won. Of course I am, because like me, she's a true believer in freedom under the rule of law. This country needs a change of direction. She's going to bring it.
When you say a change of direction, what just spell out what that means, because the Conservatives are still in government.
Absolutely. Of course, our two candidates are ideologically very, very similar. Their ideas about what should be done go in the same direction. It's not like the problems the Labour Party has. It was a question of timing of when, for example, tax cuts should happen. But Liz has been absolutely clear that we're going for growth. She's making energy her first priority, and she's making sure that we're going to be cutting taxes and helping people. So for me, Liz, she truly believes in where we're going, and she's got the courage to see it through.
In saying that, I could turn around and say earlier on this summer she talked about no handouts, that the help this winter would come from taxations. Now she seems to be suggesting that's not the case, that there will be more help effectively in a price freeze.
If you look at the way government works, there's always going to be redistribution towards the poorest. Of course there is. The question is how you do it and then how you communicate what you're going to do. To me, what I want is a kind of safety net-based freedom. So what we do is make sure that people are as free as possible, including to invest, which means keeping more of their own money, but pump money into universal credit so that the poorest not only are lifted out of poverty, but also so that they're incentivised to go to work. So by having a safety net that works, that people can bounce off, we can keep them free, get their taxes down, and I would love to have a welfare state that works for people and gets them into that position that they're free and making their own lives with lower taxes. And I think really that's the point that Liz is getting at.
But in saying that, Liz Truss said she wants to be a Conservative leader, for a Conservative party, that she's ideological. Saying that if there was to be a price cap freeze, that would be enormous government intervention. That's not very Conservative. It's going to increase our debt. It's going to cost tens and tens of billions of pounds.
Well, let's see what is actually proposed. I was very interested this morning to see what's being done in Germany. And what they're doing is limiting the amount of revenue that can be made. It's a very interesting idea that doesn't involve capping prices. It just makes sure that firms can't take too much revenue and it's not a windfall tax on their profits. So a very interesting idea. Market interventions have caused this crisis. I'm very clear about that, particularly in constraining our supply of gas. We've got gas under our feet. We've chosen not to go for it. And now here, at a time when we still use gas day after day as our primary source of electricity, here we are, we're short of that gas and prices are spiking. It should surprise no one. So what we need to do is be really clear of the causes of this crisis, which is government intervention that's wrong-headed, and then we need to do sensible things that are pragmatic to get us out of it. So I think we should look at what Germany's doing. We should look at the huge cost that's imposed on households' electricity bills through green policies. There's no getting away from it. And we should look at how we can get those costs down.
And just very finally, Steve, you know backbench mood better than probably almost any senior Conservative MP. How can Liz Truss unite this party? We know there's lots of Conservatives who don't like the fact that Boris Johnson is going or gone, and there are a lot of them that don't like Liz Truss's economic plans. They think, in some ways, it's madness.
Tory MPs are always going to disagree about things, but people may not like the idea of the professional politician. But the truth is, the reason we do it for a living is because we've become accustomed to disagreeing gracefully, perhaps not always that gracefully, compromising and moving forward together. Now, I've been answering this question for 7 years, I suppose, over Brexit, over COVID and over energy policy. Look what actually happened. We were told
I could look through you. You've had David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in quick succession. The party's never been united since Brexit.
Well, look at what actually happened at the 2019 general election. Boris Johnson had a huge victory and people rode in and delivered Brexit. I mean, we can do it. It's a choice for every member of Parliament. If we're putting the public first, as we should, I mean, some people are going to face destitution and businesses are going to face collapse. This is not a time for thinking about what I think is best. This is going to be a moment for just knuckling under and, as a Tory MP, voting with the government. And I have to say, I don't ever want to rebel again. Enough's enough. Trying to steer the life of this country from the back benches through rebellions is an impossibly hard job. I've done it on 3 different subjects. I seem to have won on all 3 subjects. That's lovely. It's not the way this country should be governed, and I'm personally going to be giving it up.
OK, interesting stuff. Steve, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Steve Becker there joined us inside the QE2 Centre. There you go, enough's enough. I'm not going to rebel again. A sign, I think, actually, of the tiredness in some ways within the Conservative Party, that yet again, here we are with a new Conservative leader, another Conservative race. That is now over, though. I think it is going to be a big challenge for the party to unite behind Liz Truss, though she has had and won a commanding victory today among the membership. Those difficult decisions will have to be made. We'll have to see how the public react to those decisions too. But she will go into Downing Street tomorrow as our 56th Prime Minister, as our 3rd female Prime Minister. Pretty happy, I would have thought, the fact that she's there, given the fact that she's fought an awful long time to get there, but with one hell of a difficult task ahead of her.
Yeah, pretty happy, no doubt, Darren. But yes, what an unenviable in-tray she faces. Darren McCaffrey, we'll talk to you later. Cheers.
Darren there talking about David Cameron and, of course, all the previous Tory Prime Ministers. Let's bring you, actually, the reaction of David Cameron, who's said this. Many congratulations to the new Prime Minister, well, as she will be, of course, this time of challenge and global uncertainty. I wish the new government well, he said. I will never forget the support I had from all former Conservative leaders when I won the ballot in 2005. Here's the interesting line. I hope all Conservatives will unite behind the new PM. A word of warning, maybe, there.
No, absolutely, of course. But, of course, naturally, when you have these internal party races, it's not blue against red, it's red against red, or in this case, it's blue against blue. And your opponent is not from the other party, it's from your own side. And, of course, all your allies and your supporters who want you to be the victor, of course, there's bad blood.
And, of course, the divisions are on economic policy at this crucial time. That's the dangerous thing.
Well, Rishi Sunak said during that contest he would rather lose the leadership contest than win on a false promise. He was referring to her policy on tax cuts, her plan to reverse that national insurance rise.
What he saw would be dangerous for inflation. Yeah. So clearly that's going to be the top of the in tray for the new Prime Minister. But let's actually listen back to her first speech as Conservative Party leader in this last half hour.
Well, thank you, Sir Graham. It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, my political colleagues and all of those who helped on this campaign. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support. I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates, particularly Rishi Sunak. It's been a hard-fought campaign. I think we have shown the depth and breadth of talent in our Conservative Party. And I also want to thank our outgoing leader, my friend, Boris Johnson. Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle. Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country. During this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And my friends, we need to show that we will deliver over the next 2 years. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. and I will deliver on the National Health Service. But we all will deliver for our country, and I will make sure that we use all the fantastic talents of the Conservative Party, our brilliant members of Parliament and peers, our fantastic councillors, our MSs, our MSPs, all of our councillors and activists and members right across our country. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
That was the victory speech and the applause in the last 45 minutes or so with that result. To remind you of the vote again, that Sir Graham Brady, the returning officer, came into the QE2 with 172,437 voters, 82.6 voting, and it led to the result of 81,326 for Liz Truss, 60,399 for Rishi Sunak. Now, that's given her
57%,
which is interesting.
And Rishi Sunak got 43%.
Yeah.
So, commanding.
Right.
But how does it compare?
Let's do some number crunching for you, just to explain why this might not be such great news for Liz Truss, because since they changed their rules back in 2001, just to allow the party membership to vote for the leader, the first result was Ian Duncan Smith back in 2001. He got 60.7% of the vote. What happened to him?
He was ousted by his party, so I'm saying don't read too much into it, but carry on.
Right, well, just some more interesting figures. David Cameron, we brought his reaction to you a few minutes ago. He got 67.6% of the Tory vote in 2005.
He would have been got rid of by his party, arguably.
Well, there were, and Boris Johnson, who was, yes, got rid of by his party, 66.4% of the vote in 2019. So 57% doesn't stack up as being that much of a majority when you compare it to those figures.
And Keir Starmer, when he stood for the Labour leadership, the Labour Party has the same sort of mechanism in that party members get the final say. However, it's not whittled down to Keir Starmer got 56%, and he's got his own fair share of critics. It just comes with the job. We're talking about the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He has been giving his reaction to Liz Truss's victory. Here he is.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households. And that shows not only that she's out of touch, but she's not on the side of working people. So she needs to deal with the cost of living crisis, she needs to deal with the fact the NHS is on its knees, and she needs to deal with the collapse of law and order. And there can be no justification for not freezing energy prices. There's a political consensus that needs to happen. She needs to answer the question, how's she going to pay for that? Labour have been clear, it needs to be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. So she needs to show that she actually understands and can meet the challenges that are there after 12 years of failure of this Tory government.
It's going to be tough, isn't it, for the Labour leader to get a hearing again. First of all, the party leadership contest for the Conservative Party. Who was interested in the Labour Party then? Now a new Prime Minister. Arguably, who is interested in the Labour Party then?
Gets a honeymoon period of, well, maybe just a few days this time because of the economy. Yeah,
we'll see.
But one of the interesting things, of course, is that Labour maybe can argue that Liz Truss is pinching their idea on the energy price cap. We've got to hear the details as yet, but clearly Keir Starmer has set that out as one of his main stalls.
And the Liberal Democrats, in fact, set it out first. But, you know, I'm not sure if voters care about that. As long as politicians take away the pain, then I'm not sure if they care whose idea it first was. Coming up, more reaction on Liz Truss's victory in the Conservative leadership contest. Just going for a short break now.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
If you haven't caught up with the news, Liz Truss has won the leadership of the Conservative Party. She got 57% of the vote compared to 43% for Rishi Sunak.
Yes, let's just reflect that that's not quite a bigger majority as we had for previous Tory leaders. As we were saying, the figures that they've compared with Ian Duncan Smith, he had 60.7% of the vote. David Cameron, 67.6% of the vote in 2005. And then Boris Johnson, 66.4% of the vote in 2019. Let's get the views of Mark Spencer, who's a former chief whip of the Tory party. And Mr. Spencer, we had David Cameron urging the party to get behind Liz Truss. Has she got enough authority with that sort of 57% majority?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's how democracy works. You know, she's clearly won the competition fair and square, and I think now the Conservative Party has to unite around her, get behind her and support her agenda.
You've been in the Cabinet, Mark, for a number of years. Are you going to be in the new one?
Well, I mean, that's a decision for the new Prime Minister. That is the privilege of being the Prime Minister. You get to choose your own Cabinet, and she'll be having some thoughts on that right now. She'll be setting out that new Cabinet in the very near future. But we all have a responsibility, whatever our status within the government, to get behind and support the new Prime Minister to solve the huge global challenges that the country faces.
Yeah, and much criticism of a zombie government that we've had while this leadership debate and the vote has been taking place. Have you actually done damage to the country by not addressing these issues about the energy bill, the cost of living crisis and all the other things hitting people in the pocket daily?
No, absolutely. That simply is not true. So when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he set out a number of steps that we were going to lay out to support people. They continue to be delivered. There's the £400 rebate, which is coming very soon. So that was rolling out up to and including the autumn. Now, the new Prime Minister has this period of time before the new price cap kicks in to set out what she would do to solve the challenges of the winter, which is coming up. So we bridge the gap to the autumn. We now have a window of opportunity to set out how we're going to help solve the challenges that people face going into the winter, and that's what she will do as the new Prime Minister.
We know that she's going to reverse Rishi Sunak's national insurance rise. That will save £59 a year for a person working full-time on the minimum wage A person earning over £100,000 a year will save more than £100,000. That's going to go down terribly in constituencies like yours, which neighboured mine.
Well, so I think what you need to understand here is that we've got to boost the economy, and I think what Liz has set out during her campaign is her desire to see investment from outside the UK come into the UK, because we all benefit from that. So if we can attract international business and be more competitive than our international neighbours, then of course people will build factories here, they will build their businesses here. That will generate more jobs, will generate more income, and will generate more tax for the exchequer, which means we'll be able to fund the great public services we all want to see.
Happen immediately, is it? You've got maybe 18 months to get your ducks in a row. Where's the money going to come from? Where some economists say it could be 75, maybe 100 billion needed to actually fund the tax cuts, to make up for the interest rate rises and to make up for the energy costs. Is there a magic money tree?
Well, let's wait until we see the details of the plans first. I think what Liz has set out is a bold agenda, which is going to stimulate the economy to make sure that we try and avoid a recession like the rest of Europe, if not the rest of the world, appears to be going into. So I think she's got a huge, bold agenda. We've got big global challenges. She seems up for that challenge to me, and I think now the Conservative Party will unite behind her and deliver that agenda to try and solve the global challenges the UK faces.
And Mark Spencer, do you have any sense of how long households will have to wait for the news, which we know is coming, on what help they will get with their energy bills?
Well, I think it's right at the top of the new Prime Minister's agenda. It'll be top of the inbox as soon as she walks in the door. She'll want to coalesce her new cabinet around her very soon, and then she'll set out her plans in the coming weeks. But, you know, I think clearly it's top of the agenda, and she'll prioritise that as her first job.
And last question, Mark, given all that, how long do you think you've got before you're going to face a general election? She's going to have to get a move on, isn't she?
Well, no, I think she solves the challenges that the country faces. We need to set out the new agenda and the challenges that we face, how we're going to solve them. And I think it needs a period of time. You know, the next election is not actually due until the end of 2024. And I think you'll see over the next couple of years the Conservative government dealing with those huge global challenges and making it clear to the electorate that actually we are best placed to solve those economic challenges. We've got the right answers for the right problems.
Mark Spencer, thanks very much indeed for joining us there at Westminster with your reaction. Thank you.
Well, one of the most pressing issues in Liz Truss's in tray, as well as the cost of living, of course, is what to do about the Channel migrant crisis. Today, the High Court is hearing a challenge to the Rwanda policy of deporting cross-channel migrants. Let's turn to our Home and Security editor, Mark White. It is there outside the Royal Courts of Justice, which starts hearing that appeal today. Mark.
Yes, good afternoon from the Royal Courts of Justice. You can see that there is a significant protest here outside this building at the moment, which is why we're not in front of the camera. Let's just say that both sides of this debate are fairly enthusiastic in terms of trying to get towards the camera and get their voices heard if they see that we're actually broadcasting live. So surreptitiously, we're trying to just bring this live report to you. There are many supporters, probably a few hundred at least, supporters of the challenge against the government here, but also about 50 or so who are trying to put their voices across. They are opposed to what's happening in the Channel, and they want the small boats crisis brought under control. Now, this, of course, is very pertinent today because Liz Truss has said prior to being elected as the new Conservative Party leader that she is also wedded to the Rwanda policy, sending many asylum seekers who arrive by small boat or indeed in the back of lorries across the Channel. to Rwanda on what is effectively a one-way ticket. But it's being challenged now as part of this judicial review. It's a 5-day hearing here at the Royal Courts of Justice. And what we've heard this morning are lawyers for those opposed to this deal saying that Rwanda is a one-party authoritarian state that imprisons, tortures and murders its opponents. The Rwanda policy, it says, is unlawful under human rights and also under the common law. It says that asylum seekers who are removed to Rwanda would face a significant risk of violation of their rights to be free from torture and inhuman treatment. The opponents, again, the lawyers telling the two judges here at the High Court who are listening to 5 days of evidence that the Rwanda policy, as far as the government is concerned, they knew that the country was unsafe when they signed the deal. However, the Home Secretary's lawyers, they are arguing that there is more up-to-date information which post-dates their earlier assessment and shows that actually Rwanda is a very safe country. I don't think anybody is pretending that it has all of the freedoms that people in the UK and many other Western countries enjoy, but as far as being safe and offering opportunities to asylum seekers, well, the government says that it does just that. As I say, Mark and Gloria, it is a 5-day hearing. Then there will be a reserved judgment. There's another hearing taking place in October. So I don't think we're going to get anything anytime soon in terms of a judgment here, probably at the very least November, maybe into December, and all of the while more people keep coming across the channel. Another 1,160 people arrived on small boats yesterday.
Mark, incognito for the moment outside the Royal Courts of Justice. Thanks very much indeed for updating us there with events.
Coming up, we'll be continuing our coverage of Liz Truss's victory. We'll speak with Education Secretary James Cleverly and we'll be heading to Liz Truss's constituency of South West Norfolk. First, it's your news update.
Good afternoon, it's 1:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Liz Truss has won the Conservative Party leadership contest and will become the country's next Prime Minister. She took more than 81,000 votes in what she described as a hard-fought campaign against Rishi Sunak, who finished with just over 60,000. The new Tory leader promised to cut taxes, grow the economy, deliver on energy and the NHS. Well, Liz Truss will travel to Balmoral tomorrow, where the Queen will officially appoint her as Prime Minister.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
The High Court has been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. They're hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Home Office, who are trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, say Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure. More than 2,000 people crossed the English Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 individuals have crossed so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Mark and Gloria will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching GB Newsday on this, a groundbreaking day for British politics once more, with all those events at the QE2 Conference Centre. What about Downing Street? Our political correspondent Tom Harwood is there because, Tom, we've got a new leader of the Conservative Party, but we've still got the old Prime Minister in place for today at least.
We do indeed, and the Prime Minister is actually working today in Downing Street. This is his last full day in office because, of course, as you rightly say, whilst the leader of the Conservative Party has changed, that's decided by the members of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister of the country has not yet changed, not until the hand of the Queen has been kissed by Liz Truss tomorrow. That happens throughout the day. Boris Johnson coming here to Downing Street in the morning, making his last speech as Prime Minister from the steps of Downing Street before flying up to Balmoral to tender his resignation officially to the Queen. Then Liz Truss immediately after meets with the Queen, is appointed Prime Minister as the Queen decides she carries the confidence of the House of Commons. That's the way our constitution works. And then she flies back down here to enter Downing Street tomorrow afternoon, making her first speech as Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street. And then it's a pretty busy evening. We're expecting cabinet appointments right throughout tomorrow evening in time for a cabinet meeting on Wednesday morning. That will be a chance for Liz Truss to show a fresh top team and potentially even make some announcements. Now, we're not expecting in the first day or so the biggest announcement on energy. That's coming within the first 7 days, so said Liz Truss yesterday. But we should expect a bit of a policy blitz over the next few days. And of course, the first Prime Minister's questions at noon tomorrow. It will be an opportunity for the Conservative Party to show whether or not it has united behind its new leader, and an opportunity to test the mettle of Liz Truss, who herself has admitted on many occasions during this leadership contest that she is not the slickest performer. But she's been trading over the last 8 weeks of this contest on almost her lack of slickness as an attribute, as something to boast of, her straightforwardness, of her straight-talking attitude. She refers to herself as a straight-talking Yorkshire woman, has said that on many occasions during the 12 hustings that took place around the country. And it will be that quality of, will she do what she says? Will she, as she has said throughout this campaign, deliver, deliver, deliver? That will be the test of the Truss premiership.
Tom, you have been up so long that it feels like tomorrow is Wednesday when you said the first PMQs would be, but actually it's not tomorrow. Tomorrow is, just to confirm, still Tuesday when Liz Truss will be installed. I was just curious as to whether you've heard about the mood in both of those camps. We know that Rishi Sunak, who is teetotal, so he can't be drowning his sorrows in a way that I may be doing this afternoon. Liz Truss probably doesn't have time to have a glass of champagne, or perhaps she does. What's the mood like?
Well, I've heard that Liz Truss has actually gone for a lunch with her husband to celebrate her win, and a small group of aides. Now, I'm not told whether or not there is alcohol at that lunch, but clearly she feels like she deserves a bit of a rest, at least in the very short term before the big day tomorrow, because there's flying up and down the country and the crucial building of that house of cards of a cabinet reshuffle, or indeed her initial cabinet appointments, because whilst you can plan these things out all on paper, all it takes is for one person to say no for that whole house of cards to come tumbling down, and you need to find people to plug gaps, shift people around. A cabinet reshuffle is never predictable. So whilst Liz Truss may well have a good idea of who she wants in which post, all it takes is one person to say no for that all to blow up. Of course, we know that when Boris Johnson delivered his initial cabinet, he offered the person he defeated in the leadership contest, Jeremy Hunt, he offered Jeremy Hunt the role of Defence Secretary. But Jeremy Hunt, who was then the outgoing Foreign Secretary, saw that as a demotion, leaving a great office of state, and so refused to be in the cabinet at all. Might we see something similar with Rishi Sunak offered a post but refusing it? That remains to be seen. Of course, we will see that reshuffle tomorrow for the senior cabinet jobs, and of course Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, for that first cabinet meeting and PMQs.
Tom, outside of Boris Johnson, number 10 for the moment at least. Thank you for the moment. Back to you, of course, a little later. But let's reflect on another person who may not feature in that new government, the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, who'd backed runner-up Rishi Sunak in the contest. Well, he spoke a little earlier and gave his reaction to Liz Truss becoming leader of the Conservative Party.
Well, look, congratulations to Liz Truss. It was a spirited campaign. I think important to test all of the policy issues. But as Rishi has said throughout the campaign, and I certainly feel, I think the overwhelming caucus of Conservative MPs will feel, now is a time for unity. We need to get behind Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, her new team, and make sure we focus on delivering for this country, in particular the cost of living challenges that we all now face.
You backed Rishi Sunak. How disappointed are you that he's not going to be the next Prime Minister?
Well, look, the campaign's over now. I think Rishi fought a very strong campaign with the integrity and the honesty that has typified him as a politician. It was closer than many people predicted. And we now move on. But the way these contests work is that once you've got that outcome, you need to turn, and we all need to turn our attention very swiftly to supporting the new Prime Minister and her new team in delivering for the British people. And particularly now with everything we've got going on, particularly with inflation and cost of living, the challenges that they present, I think that's what the public will expect, and I think that's what everyone, myself included, will do.
Would you be willing to work for Liz Truss in her cabinet?
Yes, I've said I would support her in any capability or capacity that, but I'm also very sensitive that the new Prime Minister, it's always their prerogative to pick their top team, and I'm certainly not expecting to be given an appointment.
So you are expecting to be out of a job come tomorrow?
Yes.
Have you had any discussions about that, or is
No.
it just a prediction that you've come up with yourself?
Well, I think some of the media briefing has given some indication. But look, actually what matters to me most now is that we've got a government in place, we've got a Prime Minister in place. We can really focus on the issues affecting the British people. It's not about the who's up, who's down in Westminster. It's about serving the British people, and I look forward to doing that, both locally for my constituents in East Malton and the new government in whatever form that takes.
She proposed a very different economic plan to the one that was proposed by the candidate that you supported, Rishi Sunak. We are expecting her to put out a plan for freezing energy bills, potentially cutting national insurance and corporation tax. Is that something you would be supportive of now?
Look, I'm not going to start getting into votes on specific issues. What I would say is I want to support the new Prime Minister. We've had the debate, the argument, robustly, rigorously on the substance. It's been answered. The result now of the leadership contest is known, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to come together in that spirit of unity to serve the British people and to support this Prime Minister.
Would you vote against her budget if you didn't agree with it?
I just said to you, I'm not going to get into putative votes on measures that have not even been proposed yet. I think Liz showed pragmatism as well as high principle throughout the course of the campaign, and I think she deserves a fair wind and as much support as colleagues can give her in getting off to a really strong start, and that's what I'll be focusing all of my energies on doing.
Her margin of victory isn't as much as Boris Johnson's, it's not as much as David Cameron's, I don't think it's as much as Ian Duncan Smith's. How hard is it going to be for her to unite the party at this point, given that she didn't win by as much as some of her predecessors?
I think it will be important for any new Prime Minister to show that they can unite the whole of the Conservative Party, but even more important, that they can deliver for the British people. That's what really matters, and I look forward to seeing how she approaches the first few weeks, and I'll be giving her fulsome support and in whatever capacity that may be.
One final question away from this. It's been argued in court today that the government was provided evidence from its own advisers that Rwanda isn't safe because it's an authoritarian state and has a history of abuse against refugees. Why is the government so insistent that it's a safe place to send people to?
Look, we've answered all of those questions, as has the Home Secretary, and I'm not going to comment on matters which are subject to ongoing court proceedings.
Dominic Raab, who for the moment is still Deputy Prime Minister. Effectively, of course, remember you stood in when Boris Johnson was critically ill in hospital with COVID, but clearly indicating that he's not expecting to serve in Liz Truss's new government. We're expecting that cabinet announcement from about 4 o'clock tomorrow after she's gone to Balmoral to become the new Prime Minister.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how long Dominic Raab has been in such a senior position in politics, in the cabinet.
Justice Secretary, of course, and indications that because obviously he was so much a Rishi Sunak backer that it was difficult for Liz Truss to take him on board in her new government.
Well, in a moment, we'll head over to Liz Truss's safe Conservative seat of South West Norfolk. We'll be speaking to GB News reporter Paul Hawkins, who is at the Norfolk Cheese Company. But before that, let's quickly just take a look at what Liz Truss said at the Conservative Party conference in 2015.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
Yeah, hard cheese.
Famous lines. Famous lines. That is a disgrace. Apparently, she sort of mocks herself and says that sort of internally when anyone suggests something. That is a disgrace. So she's owned it.
OK.
Paul Hawkins joins us now, and he is live in Norfolk.
With the cheese company.
Paul,
excellent.
It's all about the cheese.
That is not a disgrace. I imagine that is what Liz Truss would say if she were here. This is down a market in her constituency. We've been here gauging the mood amongst businesses and voters here and how they're feeling about the woman who's to become the next PM, their own MP. This is the Norfolk Cheese Company. They haven't been open very long. They are struggling to survive with the cost of energy, just like many businesses. We can speak to Nina now, who's the owner of the Norfolk Cheese Company. Nina, thanks for speaking to us. Just first of all, tell us a little bit about your company, about what you sell. It's not just cheese, which we'll look at in a moment. It's also stuff like this.
Yeah, local produce. So we try to get local where we can. A few other speciality products from around the world, but mainly local.
Yeah, you've got some nice. What are they? Was it mayonnaise here?
Chutneys from Norfolk. Yep. And that's from the Fine
Over
Cheese
here,
Company.
some biscuits.
Yep, some biscuits, some artisan biscuits to go with your artisan cheese, and some local alcoholic drinks and wines.
This is good stuff. And then just over here, if you just show us your cheeses.
So this is our Norfolk section, well, East Anglia. So we, have got a good selection of Norfolk cheeses, and mostly British, but a few continental in there as well.
And you've not been open very long. You used to run a market stall, so you were kind of carefree, as it were, in terms of where you go with your business. Yeah. You made that commitment to open a shop, which was obviously going to incur overhead costs. And those costs have gone up a lot.
Massively. I could have never anticipated what was going to happen. We opened just over a year ago, and it's really in the last couple of months that we've really seen that hike in costs.
Yeah.
So,
Just how much? Because you were going through your accounts earlier.
yeah, electric is gone up. £500 has gone up more than what I was paying, so a lot more, and it's looking to go up again next year if something doesn't change.
And have you absorbed that cost or passed it on?
We've mostly absorbed it up to now, but now we've got to look at maybe passing some of that on to our customers, which is not what we wanted to do. But the way we're carrying on, it wouldn't be viable to do otherwise, really.
Yeah. Now, just come with us, actually, because Liz Truss was all about growth, isn't she? She wants the economy to grow, which relies on businesses like yourself to grow. And actually, if we just have a look here, this room at the back, you were hoping to get this room, to turn this room into something else, weren't you?
Yes, we're hoping to open an eating area with tapas and bring something else to the town. I believe it is a growing town. But at the moment, I'm apprehensive to carry on that project just because of the rise in energy costs. And who knows what's going to happen next year or in the next 6 months. So
it's that lack of certainty that means you can't grow the business?
At the moment, yes. I'm wary of doing so. Absolutely, yeah.
And so how do you feel about Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister?
I hope she's going to be good for the town. I hope she's going to be good for the country. But I hope she's going to be good for the town, and especially small businesses, because we are struggling. You know, we need help. I know everybody needs help, but this is the new pandemic for us. So,
what kind of help? Because she's talked about help with energy bills, certainly for people at home, getting rid of VAT on their bills, getting rid of the green levy. But for businesses, we're not clear what kind of help she's going to give there. What would you like to see?
I'd like there to be a price cap on business electric, because that will give us reassurance, and knowing that the prices aren't going to be through the roof next year. At least we know where we stand. Okay, the prices are high, but if we knew they weren't going to get any higher, that would be a massive reassurance, and I could probably carry on growing my business. So.
Yeah, just take us back to the cheeses. Let's just finish up at the cheeses, because you can never get too much gratuitous cheese action, in my opinion, anyway. Liz Truss has been in this shop, hasn't she?
She has. Unfortunately, it was my day off, so I wasn't here. But she's been in, and so she has supported us as a business.
Yeah. What cheese did she buy?
I have it on good faith that she may have bought a very popular German cheese. But I don't know. I wasn't here.
A popular German cheese. That is a disgrace, because you've got so much good Norfolk cheese here, haven't you?
She did buy Norfolk cheeses as well.
Okay.
Just to backtrack on that.
All right, fair enough. So she mixed it up a little bit then.
She did, yeah.
Really good to speak to you. Thanks for
Thank
speaking
you.
to us, and best of luck with the business. So there you go. Liz Truss has been to this shop. She did have some German cheese, but she did buy some Norfolk cheese as well. That is the breaking cheese news this lunchtime.
Well, Paul Hawkins, I hope she comes in again as Prime Minister, because I thought the voice and the testimony from Nina about how much small businesses help was absolutely, so compelling. So, Paul Hawkins, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Liz Truss buys German cheese. That is a disgrace. Some
How
would
many
say.
times are we going to use that?
But, I mean, interesting point here in that many small businesses obviously have been trying to absorb these extra costs. I mean, the latest economic activity figures, the PMI survey...
PMI, Mark.
Yeah,
PMI?
50.9, down from 52.6 for July. The slowest expansion in a year and a half, which shows that there is a real mounting threat of a recession. And now we're hearing why, because no one is able to make any plans or invest because they don't really know what's coming down the pipeline for the next year or 18 months.
And shops like that, I'd love to have a shop like that, but they're the lifeblood of our high streets and our communities. Now, a fourth man is being questioned over the killing of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool last month.
Well, several men have been arrested in connection with that killing, so let's get the very latest now with our GB News North West reporter, Sophie Reaper, joining us there. What are police saying at the moment, Sophie?
Well, they're still urging the people of Liverpool to come forward with any information they may have. We've had an update today. We heard that yesterday a 34-year-old man was stopped by police on the M42 near Leamington Spa in Warwickshire. His vehicle was seized and he was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Now, the three other men were also arrested yesterday. A 34-year-old man from Liverpool was arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and a 29-year-old man and a 41-year-old man were both arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Now, these aren't the first arrests in this case. Just days after Olivia's death, a 36-year-old man from Huyton and a 33-year-old man from Dovecot were both also arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. They've both been released on bail, whereas, as far as we know, the four men who were arrested yesterday still remain in custody. We also heard last week that Olivia's funeral will take place next Thursday, with mourners being asked to wear a splash of pink in the little girl's memory. As her family prepare to say goodbye, Merseyside police remain adamant they will find her killer, with their message to the people of Merseyside and beyond remaining the same, that silence is not an option.
Sophie, thank you very much indeed for updating us there. Thanks.
Coming up in the next hour, we'll be continuing the coverage of Liz Truss's victory and the challenges she faces when she becomes Prime Minister. That's after your weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather update. Today, many places will be dry and fine with sunny spells, but we are expecting a few showers, and later on those showers may well turn into thunderstorms. This area of low pressure, get used to it, because it's going to dominate our weather throughout this week, and it's going to throw spiralling bands of heavy showers across the UK as well. One is clearing away from northern Scotland and another one is approaching the southwest. The wind's picking up here as well and quite gusty once more in the far northeast. May see one or two showers across the southeast, the odd one developing over the Midlands, but the main area across South Wales and southwest England through the afternoon into the evening. Otherwise, as I said, most places dry and fine, quite warm actually for the time of year. 24, 25 degrees across the east. But these downpours developing more widely, South Wales, southwest England. Some big thundery showers are likely this evening, and they'll drift their way northwards as well. So you may get woken up by a rumble of thunder. Could be some large hail, and certainly those downpours bringing a lot of rain in a short space of time. They all spill to the north across Scotland by dawn. Elsewhere it turns drier, and it will be quite a warm and humid night once more. Tuesday's a similar day, actually, with large parts of the country dry and fine, but we'll have a few more showers tomorrow over southern Scotland and northern England. And then again, we look down to the south and the west, where further bands of heavy, thundery showers track northwards. You'll be lucky to have a completely dry day tomorrow. These downpours, again, like to be quite heavy. Some welcome rain, obviously, across the Midlands and eastern parts of England. And we are going to see more downpours here as we head through Tuesday evening. That band of rain also extending further across North Wales and into Northern Ireland. So as I said, I think we'll all see some bursts of rain over the next couple of days, and really for the rest of this week, with that low pressure continuing to dominate. Yes, there'll be spells of sunshine at times, but we'll all see some heavy showers as well. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters, with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very warm welcome. You're watching GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst, and Gloria De Piero, live and breaking news throughout the afternoon.
And of course, there's only one story that everyone is talking about today. Liz Truss will be our next Prime Minister. Let's catch up now with the latest headlines with Rosie Wright. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it's time for the Conservative Party to get behind Liz Truss, who will now become the country's next leader. Truss secured more than 81,000 votes in what she described as a hard-fought campaign against Rishi Sunak, who finished with just over 60,000. He's thanked his supporters, saying it's right now to unite behind the new Prime Minister as she steers the country through difficult times. The new Tory leader promised to cut taxes, grow the economy, deliver on energy and the NHS. Well, Liz Truss will travel to Balmoral tomorrow, where the Queen will officially appoint her as Prime Minister.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, says the party has to now focus on delivering for the country.
Well, look, congratulations to Liz Truss. It was a spirited campaign. I think important to test all of the policy issues. But as Rishi has said throughout the campaign, and I certainly feel, I think the overwhelming caucus of Conservative MPs will feel, now is a time for unity. We need to get behind Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, her new team, and make sure we focus on delivering for this country, in particular the cost of living challenges that we all now face.
The Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she'll seek to build a good working relationship with Liz Truss. The Labour leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, says the incoming Prime Minister doesn't have her priorities right.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households. And that shows not only that she's out of touch, but that she's not on the side of working people. So she needs to deal with the cost of living crisis, she needs to deal with the fact the NHS is on its knees, and she needs to deal with the collapse of law and order.
In other news now, the High Court's been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. It's hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to the country. The Home Office, which is trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, says Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure. That's as more than 2,000 people crossed the Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have been intercepted so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year.
4 men have been arrested in connection with the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool in the past 24 hours. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman as he chased his intended target into her home last month. Her mother was also injured. A 34-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. 3 others have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. Police in Canada are hunting for 2 men suspected of killing 10 people in a wave of stabbings in Saskatchewan. The suspects, named as Damien and Miles Sanderson, are accused of launching attacks across 13 crime scenes. At least 15 other people were injured. Police say it appears some of the victims were targeted, others were stabbed at random. The RAC says drivers are getting a raw deal at the petrol pump despite a record drop in the price of fuel last month. It says average forecourt prices dropped to over 12 pence to 169 pence per litre at the end of August, the largest monthly fall since records began. But the car company says current wholesale prices mean consumers should be paying around 161 pence per litre. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will make their first public appearance in the UK since returning for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They're heading to Manchester today for the One Young World Summit, an event bringing together young leaders from more than 190 countries. Their security here is under scrutiny. The Duke's currently bringing legal action against the Home Office after a ruling that Harry couldn't pay for police protection for him and his family when they're in the UK. This is GB News. I'll have an update for you in half an hour.
Rosie, thank you very much indeed. So, Liz Truss is going to be our new Prime Minister, confirmed this afternoon after that result of the Conservative leadership race announced in her favour a little earlier at the QE2 Conference Centre. Those were the figures.
She won with 57.3% of the vote to Rishi Sunak's 42.7%.
Well, former Chancellor tweeting his support for the new Tory leader, saying that Rishi Sunak was right to unite behind Liz as she steers the country through difficult times. That's the quote. And, of course, he would know as a former Chancellor. Let's cross now to Westminster and speak to current Secretary of State for Education, James Cleverly, who backed Liz Truss. Mr Cleverly, thank you for joining us here on GB Newsday. Why didn't she do better? 57.3% when we had Ian Duncan Smith with 60.7% of the vote in 2001, David Cameron 67.6%, and then Boris Johnson 66.4%. It's not a huge majority, is it?
It is a clear and comprehensive win against an incredibly tough opponent. I might remind you that going into this competition, Rishi Sunak was the odds-on favourite, people basically suggesting it was going to be a walk in the park for him. And what we saw from Liz is her experience using the experience that she's generated through a number of government departments and a really effective team that she built around her, delivering an incredibly effective campaign, overturn those odds and win with a comprehensive margin. And those are the things that we're going to need in the new Prime Minister. That experience, that tenacity, the ability to build a good team and the ability to campaign. It's a good win.
You are being tipped for great things in the new cabinet. You are one of her supporters. How important is it for Liz Truss to ensure that there are people who didn't back her in the contest who are in key positions come that cabinet reshuffle tomorrow?
Well, Liz has always said that she wants to have a top team, a strong team around her. Ultimately, of course, it is for her to have the conversations with people about the formation of a government. But she's also made it clear that we have a very pressing set of circumstances. She wants people that are able to hit the ground running and also that really buy into the need to grow the British economy and stand up to the aggression from Russia into Ukraine, as well as a whole range of other global issues that we are having to deal with. We've got an incredibly strong parliamentary team. I have no doubt that people who backed candidates in that election will form part of that team, but ultimately that's a decision for Liz to make.
Are you going to be taking on Labour's idea to freeze the energy prices? Clearly, Keir Starmer thinks that you may have to.
Well, Liz said in her acceptance speech that we need to help those people who are going to be struggling with the increased energy bills that are a result of the war in Ukraine and the squeeze on global energy supply. She also says, of course, that we have to deal with that aggression and other global factors, but it wouldn't be right for me to speculate or predict what the Chancellor will be making in their speech once that position has been filled by the new Prime Minister.
Very limited time to put these things into position, and a lot of the criticism has been that we've had effectively a government, a zombie government that's not been dealing with these things in these past weeks.
Well, we've got to remember that throughout this leadership competition, Boris Johnson was still Prime Minister. We had a Chancellor, a Business Secretary who were working with those energy companies and pushing to get resolution on this. Ministry of Defence working incredibly hard, continuing their support of the Ukrainians in their defence. I was working on exam results and university admission. So although the focus has understandably been on this leadership competition, the government has been working hard on those issues which are affecting people here and now. And now that the decision's been made as to who the leader of the party is and who the next Prime Minister is going to be, I have no doubt that Liz will be putting her considerable attention and effort into those issues as well.
Will we hear from the new Prime Minister this week? People are desperate for answers. Can we assume that she will tell us what her plans are this week?
Well, as I say, there's going to be the opportunity for a fiscal announcement, for an announcement, a mini budget, whatever the phrase you want to use is. That will be coming up in due course. It wouldn't be right for me to speculate as to what might be in that, and I genuinely don't have the details of when that might be coming forward. But she absolutely knows, and she said as a priority, she will be looking at helping those families and businesses that are really struggling because of the impact of global events like the war in Ukraine.
Accepting what you have said, I just wondered whether you perhaps had quietly checked on your passport to see if it was still up and running for any particular reason?
I'm not going to start speculating as to who Liz is going to bring into her government. Look, I've worked with her at Foreign Office. She's an incredibly strong leader, a really good leader. If I have the opportunity to work with her in government again, I'd be delighted to do so. But those decisions are for her and certainly not for me.
You might avoid the passport queues if you do get that nod tomorrow. James Cleverly, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
One of the big issues which Liz Truss will have to face is the Northern Ireland Protocol.
That's right. Well, previously, of course, saying she will scrap that, but when she becomes Prime Minister, she will perhaps go through with it. Who knows?
Well, we can speak to GB News' Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Tell us what people would like to hear where you are.
Well, welcome to Stormont, the home of where Northern Ireland's government is meant to be, of course, and it's not sitting because of that controversial protocol bill. It keeps Northern Ireland inside the UK, but inside EU legislation and regulation, a very hard thing to do, and a big thing that we will be hearing about over the next few months is triangulation, goods coming from Northern Ireland, travelling to the UK and then not being able to get back in to Northern Ireland. But really, who would be Prime Minister? The parties here, both Sinn Féin and the DUP, have already been out, congratulated Liz Truss, but basically said time to get down to the protocol and have a look at it. I don't think it'll be very far up her agenda, to be honest. When we look at what's in front of her, she's got the cost of living crisis. Just 2 weeks ago, I ran through Britain looking at agriculture, and one of the biggest problems with the cost of food is that there's no common agricultural policy. There hasn't been since 2016, since we left the EU. We now have regions doing separate things and treating themselves separately, and of course that puts them in competition with each other. But we have had a green policy, an environmental policy set upon those farmers, and with no common agricultural policy, there's no business plan of how to deal with those rising prices that they're being asked to deal with. And of course, the farmers are quite rightly handing that straight to us, the consumer, in the shopping basket. We have the employment laws, the big problems around there, this 0 hours contracts, and of course those employment agencies. During the pandemic, it was very much exposed that those people couldn't get furlough. They're self-employed, but they work for other people, and they ended up on the, I suppose, the Ferris wheel of benefits, and they've stayed there because they're quite good benefits. Housing, that will be a big one in 18 months' time. Can they make housing affordable and get young people on that ladder? There's a problem there with raw materials. We can't get raw materials. Most of our goods are being made in the Far East. We exported our manufacturing with Margaret Thatcher back in the 70s and 80s. Liz Truss is being talked about as the new Thatcher. Well, she might be the anti-Thatcher because she's going to have to bring manufacturing back, get our raw materials going, and she may have to open mines and allow fracking to happen in order to get the cost of living under control. And of course, she then has the public sector to deal with, and she has said that she wants to shrink the public sector. Both herself and Rishi Sunak have said that it's far too big. And in Northern Ireland, it most definitely is. 72% of the employment in Northern Ireland depends on the public sector. And to negotiate with unions, she must be very strong. But unlike Thatcher, she will have to negotiate with the institutions in and around Britain, the Welsh Assembly, the Northern Irish Assembly and the Scottish Assembly in order to impose on that. And we haven't even touched on the Ukraine or the NHS and most of all the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Dougie in Stormont, thank you very much indeed for that.
We can cross over to Westminster now and speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, you're at outside the building where the result was announced. Liz Truss must be already getting busy.
She is indeed, and actually just to give you a little bit of a geography kind of coordination of where I am, this is the Queen Elizabeth II Centre. This is what the announcement was made, a couple of hours ago. Westminster Abbey is right behind me, Parliament is there, but around that corner, just over there, is the headquarters of the Conservative Party. CCHQ it's called, just beyond the Central Methodist Hall here in central London, and that is where Liz Truss is right now. She arrived about half an hour ago with Therese Coffey. She is in there clearly meeting the Conservative Party staff because she is now Conservative leader, not Prime Minister, but Conservative leader. She is meeting those staff, thanking them, I'm sure, for all the hard work they did this summer during that election campaign, but getting to know people there. And actually, when you look at the window, when you look through the window on the reception, there's a big poster of Boris Johnson on the wall. I assume that this afternoon that will be taken down and replaced by Liz Truss. We're not really expecting though to hear much now from Liz Truss for the rest of the afternoon. I'd say she has just become Conservative leader, but she's not yet Prime Minister because Downing Street is just over there a little bit, and Boris Johnson is currently still ensconced in there in his last full day as Prime Minister. He is working. In fact, I think we're expecting to make a few phone calls to some world leaders this afternoon. And then tomorrow is the really significant day for you, I, and everyone else, because that is when Boris Johnson, we expect him to leave Downing Street in the morning, make his speech, his last speech as Prime Minister. He'll then travel up to Scotland, of course, to see the Queen in Balmoral, where he'll tender his resignation. And in the sidelines, ready to go into the room as soon as Boris Johnson leaves, will be Liz Truss, where the Queen will ask her to form a government. She will do so, arrive back into London, and we expect her to speak on the steps of Downing Street at around 4 p.m. before she gets down to the cold, hard reality of governing. And why I say the cold, hard reality of governing, because yes, she has to appoint a cabinet, and yes, she's got Prime Minister's question time on Wednesday lunchtime, but fundamentally she has got probably the most difficult in-tray that any Prime Minister has faced, at least since '79 when Thatcher became Prime Minister, maybe even before then, trying to tackle that incoming energy crisis this autumn and winter, how to steer the economy away from what could be a rather prolonged recession, try and deal with the migration crisis in the English Channel. In addition to that, the NHS, which is in a pretty terrible state post-pandemic and going into another difficult winter, and I could go on and on and on, but it is going to be a very, very difficult period. She's not really going to have a honeymoon, and I think the next couple of weeks actually really could define her premiership.
Very, very quickly, do we know what's happened to Rishi? Has he had to leave with his legs, his tail between his legs?
Well, in many ways he shouldn't do, because actually looking at the polls and what he actually achieved in the end with 43% was probably better than I think anyone had predicted. So I don't think it's tails between his legs, but yes, I suspect we're not really going to hear much from Rishi Sunak in the days, weeks and months to come. He's not likely to be in Liz Truss cabinet. I don't think he'd even want to be there. He will slip very comfortably, I think, onto the backbenches for the next couple of months, maybe even years. I don't think he wants to get into public disagreements about the economic course of the country, with Liz Truss having to make some of those difficult decisions. Where he's physically gone, though, I have to say I do not know, but I really would be surprised if we hear much from Rishi Sunak in the days and weeks to come.
Darren, for that, thank you very much. Outside the QE2 building, of course, where that vote took place a little earlier.
Well, Prime Minister Liz Truss has a pretty full in tray, to say the least. Not only does she need to unveil an energy support package for households, she's also overseeing an economy characterised by spiralling prices, a growth slowdown and, in her view, high taxation. So let's hear from GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan for his take on Trustonomics. Can't even say it, I'll have to learn that one, with his new regular feature On the Money.
Now, Liz Truss began her political life as a Liberal Democrat. She voted Remain in the 2016 Brexit referendum. But now she's won this prolonged Tory leadership contest and become Prime Minister by advocating Trustonomics, an economic policy package that appeals particularly to low-tax, small-state Conservatives, those more on the right of her party. So what does Trustonomics look like? First things first, Truss needs to reassure cash-strapped households that the government will provide a household energy package in the face of spiralling bills. The typical family will be paying around £3,600 a year from October. That's a threefold rise in less than 12 months. What will the government do to help? Already, the government's extending £400 of assistance to all households, plus an additional £650 or so to households in receipt of certain qualifying benefits. But these measures were announced months ago, and since then, wholesale energy prices have risen much more. So Truss and her team are now strongly considering freezing energy bills altogether in a bid to ease the burden on households, and that's likely to cost the government billions of pounds, possibly as much as furlough, according to some insiders, not least as no one knows when wholesale energy prices will return to normal. As well as households, ministers need to consider the impact of this energy price crisis on firms, because across the UK, all kinds of companies, from steel makers and manufacturers to pubs, shops and restaurants, are seeing their energy bills spiral 4, 5, even tenfold. There is no energy price cap for firms, tens of thousands of which are now at risk of bankruptcy if their energy bills continue to spiral and there's no government help. We already know that Prime Minister Liz Truss wants to reverse the 1.25 percentage point rise in national insurance, which former Chancellor Rishi Sunak introduced from April. She also campaigned on a platform suspending renewable subsidies on utility bills, which should help bring down household electricity costs. And she wants to scrap another Sunak policy to raise corporation tax from 19 to 25% in 2023. All in all, Prime Minister Truss says she wants to pursue a low-tax pro-growth agenda. And that's just fine, according to the economist Professor Patrick Minford, a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher.
Liz Truss's programme is going to get the tax system back on track as a pro-growth mechanism. And then what the Treasury has done is to say, oh, no, you can't do that because of borrowing constraints. But this is getting everything the wrong way round. I mean, borrowing is an important instrument to allow you to get taxes right. And then what you do about debt is you keep your debt ratio in the long run falling to a safe level. And that's what we've done for centuries, actually, and it's given us our good reputation in markets.
Since she started campaigning for this Tory leadership and thus the keys to number 10, Truss's low tax policies have attracted a lot of criticism. Economists close to the Treasury have raised their eyebrows, suggesting a programme that's both high spending and tax cutting could eventually alarm financial markets. But Professor Minford says Sunak and his supporters, they don't understand economics.
I think Rishi Sunak has just completely failed to understand what modern research is telling us. And this whole Treasury orthodoxy is really a sort of harking back to a fearful past where there was no confidence in the possibility of Britain running its affairs efficiently and generating growth. Of course, if you go back to the 80s, we had quite successful growth policies and a lot of supply side reforms. And that was a period of great success in the economy. And I think since then, we've kind of slid away from a lot of that. A lot of that has been reversed.
Now, as Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister, the pound's been falling. It just hit a 37-year low against the dollar. Yet her supporters say the UK needs to go for growth, and that means cutting taxes and maybe taking some risks. The big picture is, once this energy support package is announced, Truss's growth plans are likely to cause a lot of controversy. Economics and the cost of living is set to dominate the news agenda for months to come. And by the way, just before I go, you can listen to the full 25-minute version of that Patrick Minford interview. It'll be posted soon on my Money Talks podcast on the GB News YouTube channel, iTunes, Spotify, or via the GB News app. But for now, back to you, Gloria and Mark.
Liam, thank you very much indeed. Trustonomics, we've got to get used to saying that, haven't we?
Trustonomics, I've got it right.
Trustonomics, there we go.
Let's get some reaction from the Labour Party as Liz Truss is set to become Prime Minister tomorrow. Let's now cross live to Westminster to speak to Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, good to see you. Labour and the Liberal Democrats, for that matter, says energy bills should not rise, that they wouldn't under either a Labour or Lib Dem administration. Liz Truss is clearly going to have that policy and announce it herself. You must be pleased.
I hope she does. I was slightly bemused reading today's front pages because it seems like Liz Truss has reached the conclusion that the freeze is the right thing to do and is tying herself up in knots trying to find any other way than a windfall tax on oil and gas companies to pay for it, just so that she can say, I'm not copying Labour. Look, we don't care if she copies our work. In fact, we actively want her to take that policy up. It would deliver help to everyone in our country. It would also have targeted support for those pensioners and people on lower incomes who need a bit more help. And it would be paid for fairly with a windfall tax on oil and gas companies who are raking up record profits. So I hope she does the right thing, because if there's one thing that I feel very frustrated for about today coming back to Westminster on the first day back of the parliamentary term, the government have been there all summer. OK, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have had to go around trying to get the votes of Conservative Party members, but there's still been a Prime Minister, there's still been a Chancellor, there's still been a Cabinet, but we haven't seen any of them. And I think it's unforgivable, actually, that whether it's the cost of living crisis, the biggest crisis in the history of the NHS, the breakdown in law and order, the government have been missing in action. And I think they've made Liz Truss's job even harder than it already is.
Just backtrack to what you've just said. Does that mean that Labour will support Liz Truss on this energy policy?
Well, if she nicks our policy, we're hardly going to vote against it, are we? And we're not going to be that churlish. We want her to take our policy up. We actively want her to do it. It's there. It's costed. She doesn't have to waste loads of time getting the civil servants to knock up some new options for her. There's one ready-made, and she's welcome to take it. It would deliver real help to people right now.
If they make a success of that, if they make a success of other policies, the party actually comes together and, as David Cameron says, basically supports her, that's going to make life very difficult for you and Keir Starmer.
Well, two things, really. One, let's see if the Conservative Party does come behind her. Liz Truss suffers from the disadvantage of having the support of a lower proportion of Conservative MPs than any incoming Conservative Prime Minister in history. And the support she achieved amongst party members, whilst there was a clear margin between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, there was still a lower proportion of party members than many of her predecessors, going right back to Ian Duncan Smith. And if I kind of take what my kind of reading of the Conservative membership from Conservative MPs and Conservative supporting newspapers, I think there's a sense amongst the activists that they're not very happy that Boris Johnson has gone, and they're not very happy about the change in regime. So all of that leads to choppy waters. Now, I mention that not because Westminster political drama is particularly interesting to people, it might be interesting to some. It's more that we've already had a summer where Liz Truss has spoken exclusively to Conservative Party members. This week she seems to be talking exclusively now to Conservative Party MPs to try and bring them back on board. At some point she needs to start speaking to and for the country that's been without an effective and functioning government now since before the summer, because they've basically all cleared off on holiday and haven't really done much, saying, oh, it's for the next Prime Minister to deal with. So she's got a lot to do, and the country needs her to succeed, because we've got the economy in an absolute mess with the cost of living crisis. The NHS is in such a state. I mean, you would have seen, as I did, those
Sorry, but Wes, can I come in just because we're a bit short of time?
Absolutely shocking.
We're about to have, our nation is about to have our third female Prime Minister, all of them Conservatives. Why can't Labour manage one woman leader in all its history?
Well, all I'll say, Gloria, is on my part, it's not for want of trying. I've nominated a woman for the Labour leadership every time we've had a leadership contest. In the end, the best candidate, as far as members are concerned, have won. All I would say is that when it comes to diversity in politics, a majority of Labour MPs are women. We've got a very diverse gender balance.
Not in the top
shadow
jobs.
cabinet. We draw from talents right across the party. No, not in the top job.
Not in the top jobs, and I think tomorrow you may have all the four great officers of state held by, none of them held by a white bloke. Wow.
Maybe, and look, I think that having people from a range of backgrounds is a good thing. The one challenge I would level at the Conservative Party, especially thinking about our last Prime Minister and our last Chancellor, and I think I've said this on GB News before, that the thing about the Conservative Party, it's not that they go into work in the Treasury or in Downing Street every day thinking, how can we plunge more people into poverty in our country, like some kind of, Disney villains. That's not the character of the people we're up against. It's more that too often their cabinets have people around the table who just don't know what life is like for most people in this country, haven't lived ordinary lives, haven't lived on an ordinary income, and therefore the decisions they make don't act in the interests of the majority of people. And I very much hope, for the sake of people out there who are really struggling, and we're not just talking about the poorest here, and we're not just talking about pensioners, I think the majority of people in this country are really watching their bills at the moment, watching their bank balances, making economies, cutting back on things they would like to do, cutting back on things that are essential in many cases for them to do. And I really hope more than anything else, there's one thing that this new Prime Minister and Chancellor can do, it's to grip the cost of living crisis and give help to people who desperately need it.
Down at Westminster, thanks very much indeed for bringing us your reaction here on GB Newsday. Thanks for your time. Well, more politics, of course, to come, but first let's get an update on all the news headlines with Rosie.
It's coming up to 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The outgoing Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says it's time for the Conservative Party to get behind Liz Truss, who will now become the country's next leader. Truss secured more than 81,000 votes in what she described as a hard-fought campaign against Rishi Sunak, who finished with just over 60,000. He's thanked his supporters, saying it's now right to unite behind the soon-to-be Prime Minister as she steers the country through difficult times. The new Tory leader promised to cut taxes, grow the economy, deliver on energy and the NHS. She'll travel to Balmoral tomorrow, where the Queen will officially appoint her as Prime Minister.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
In other news, the High Court's been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. The court's hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to the country. The Home Office, which is trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, has warned there'll be more deaths if the business model of people smugglers isn't broken. Well, more than 2,000 people crossed the Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have been intercepted so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. TV, online and DAB+ radio don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Let's take you to the House of Commons because, yes, they're back at work. And that is the present Home Secretary, Priti Patel, in the chamber because they're back from the summer recess. And even though we've got the leadership election underway, government continues to work.
Yes, and every Monday at this time you have departmental questions. Today it is the turn of the Home Office. Now, whenever you read the reports of who is going to be Home Secretary after the reshuffle tomorrow, Priti Patel's name does not feature. So this could be the first time the last time, that we see Priti Patel holding one of the great offices of state, that of Home Secretary.
Suella Braverman is being suggested as possible Home Secretary?
She is being tipped, that's indeed.
And clearly, obviously, we've got the High Court deciding on the Rwanda cases as well, so it's very much a news story of the moment. We've got Mark White following that particular story for us. But following the politics, of course, we've got number 10 still under Boris Johnson. Let's actually cross there now, and our political correspondent Tom Harwood has been following the events for us, because, Tom, we must remind people, Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister today.
Yes, still Prime Minister for a few hours more. Boris Johnson currently working in Downing Street behind me, so says his official spokesman. Now, Boris Johnson does have some things on his to-do list today, not least a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That's coming this afternoon. But really, it is also wrapping up. I've been told that the process for moving out of Downing Street begun over the weekend. weekend. There were a couple of pictures of removal vans spotted in this street over the weekend. And of course, Boris Johnson leaves for the last time as Prime Minister tomorrow morning. That's before taking an aeroplane up to Scotland to meet the Queen and indeed tender his official resignation. Immediately after, Liz Truss kisses the Queen's hand, takes an aeroplane from Balmoral back down to Westminster and indeed makes her first speech as Prime Minister tomorrow afternoon. That's before all of those cabinet appointments that we have been discussing. It's interesting looking at Home Office questions there in the House of Commons. Priti Patel has stayed neutral in this race, in this Conservative leadership race. There was a lot of speculation that she would throw her hat in to the ring and stand as a candidate herself. That never happened, and ultimately a huge number of candidates, 12 or 13 candidates at one point, stood in this race. Priti Patel decided the field was just too broad, that there wouldn't be a way in, but perhaps that's a decision, and her neutrality in this contest may be a factor that plays against her in the next 24 hours, as tomorrow afternoon and evening those appointments to the cabinet are made, because it does look likely that the cabinet is going to be based predominantly, or at least the very senior roles of the cabinet, based highly on loyalty. Those who are close to Liz Truss, those who have supported Liz Truss, and those that share an ideological vision as well. So those names that we're looking at, particularly for those great offices of state, for the Treasury, for the Home Office, and indeed the Foreign Office, we're looking at Kwasi Kwarteng, a very close ally of Liz Truss. We're looking at him becoming Chancellor of the Exchequer. Someone so close to Liz Truss, entered Parliament at the same time, wrote a book together in the early part of the last decade, and has been a key ally of Liz Truss throughout this leadership contest. As for Foreign Secretary, we were speaking to him just a little bit earlier. James Cleverly, of course, tipped for that role. Again, a very close ally of Liz Truss through this process, and indeed served as Minister under Liz Truss in the Foreign Office as well. And as for the Home Office, as you rightly mentioned, the big speculation is Suella Braverman, currently Attorney General, getting a promotion. But as I say, not so long to wait now. Currently, I understand, the processes of changeover, of handover, at least with officials, are taking place. That's the people around Liz Truss who she'll want to bring in to Downing Street already, just immediately after that announcement became known, that leadership contest finally concluded. Conversations already going on with the mechanisms and the staff of the building behind me and the new team that Liz Truss will want to bring in. It's understood that Liz Truss will be having a very big shake-up of the hundreds of offices that exist in the sprawling complex behind me. People forget it's not just number 10 and number 11, but actually over there we can see number 12, number 9, and it connects all the way through to Whitehall. Hundreds of offices in the huge machinery of government. It's not just a change in Prime Minister, not just a change in cabinet ministers, but also to some extent a large change in those who work under them as well.
Tom, going from Prime Minister to backbench MP is an interesting and difficult role. David Cameron quit Parliament. Theresa May, I was going to say loyally serves on the backbenchers. Sometimes, well, she serves on the backbenchers diligently.
She appeared, yeah.
Diligently serves on the backbenchers. What sort of former Prime Minister is Boris Johnson going to be?
Ooh.
It's fascinating looking at all of the speculation around the future of Boris Johnson. No doubt a column in a national newspaper approaching very quickly, and we'll all be peering over the reports of income for MPs, because no doubt Boris Johnson will be making a lot of money, both in writing and in giving speeches around the world. He has such a large brand that he will no doubt be monetising it. As for Parliament, he's got some choices. He could be the incredible sulk, the sort of Ted Heath model. Ted Heath, of course, stayed in Parliament for decades after leaving the role of Prime Minister, and indeed Harold Macmillan, Super Mac, who stood down as Prime Minister, stayed on in the Commons for years and years and years, allegedly because he believed a grateful nation would invite him back to the role of Prime Minister. He eventually, of course, went to the Lords, but he stayed in the Commons for a long time, expecting that he may be brought back in. Might that be a model? But then, of course, we get to Gordon Brown. He was basically absent for the 5 years after the 2010 general election, still an MP, served out his term, but very rarely ever turned up in the chamber of the House of Commons. Lots of options for Boris Johnson, a lot of speculation that he thinks this isn't the last of his moment at the front line of British politics.
Fascinating, fascinating stuff, Tom. Speak to you lots tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much. A grateful nation waiting for the recall. That may echo for Boris Johnson.
He does break all the rules, doesn't he,
Yeah,
Boris
and of course
Johnson?
he's written a book on the Churchill factor. Churchill came back in 1952 after that defeat in 1945, so maybe he'll take that as a lesson from history as well. Who
We'll
knows?
bring you whatever happens to Boris Johnson live on GB News. We promise that.
Now, another pressing issue for Liz Truss as she officially becomes Prime Minister tomorrow, the issue of Scottish independence.
Earlier on in her leadership campaign, she said the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is to ignore her because she's an attention seeker. That is what she is.
Well, in a congratulatory tweet a short while ago, Nicola Sturgeon actually said this: "Congratulations to Liz Truss. Our political differences are deep, but I will seek to build a good working relationship with her, as I did with the last 3 Prime Ministers."
She goes on.
Yeah, she must now freeze energy bills for people and businesses, deliver more cash support and increase funding for public services.
Let's now get some reaction from Scotland and speak to the political editor of the Daily Mail, Michael Blackley. Michael, how did those comments go down with the SNP government, that the best way to deal with Nicola Sturgeon is to ignore her?
Well, I think there were a lot of people within the SNP that wanted to make quite a big deal of these comments. They tried to portray them as being something of a attack on Scotland itself and on the decisions of the Scottish electorate for there to be a Scottish SNP government. So they very much tried to portray that as an attack on Scotland rather than an attack on Nicola Sturgeon. But of course, from Liz Truss's perspective, she has, during this campaign, been quite forthright in trying to change the relationship with the First Minister in many ways, because previous Prime Ministers have been very worried about saying anything about Scotland. If it comes to devolved areas, be it health or education, they would just never criticise anything that's going on in Scotland because they were pretty frightened of doing so. So I think what's going to change under Liz Truss is that she seems to be willing to be critical and willing to actually say, if things aren't going right in Scotland, then something needs to be done about it. And I think in doing that, she's very much responding to some of what you hear a lot from grassroots Conservative members in Scotland. Don't give Nicola Sturgeon a free ride is the sort of thing that they are often saying. And I think she's quite keen to respond to that. So I think we'll see a different relationship. Surprised slightly to hear Nicola Sturgeon talk about trying to have a good relationship with the last 3 Prime Ministers. Perhaps some people might not have noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, do you think actually that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are thinking, Liz Truss could prove a bit of a handful politically for them?
I think there's an element of that. I mean, I think there are people within the SNP that also think that she'll be a gift for the SNP, but they thought the same about Boris Johnson, and that didn't actually happen. In many ways, Boris Johnson was who the SNP would have wanted to be Prime Minister because they thought that he would boost support for independence. But actually, when you look at the polls, it hasn't changed much, which perhaps shows that issues about the Union and Scottish independence are about far more than individual personalities. But one thing that perhaps some within the SNP are slightly fearful of with Liz Truss is that she is a straight talker, and that does have something of an appeal to the electorate as well. So it will be interesting to see just what impact the slightly different approach of Liz Truss compared to Boris Johnson will have on the popularity of the Conservatives in Scotland.
And Michael, Nicola Sturgeon is determined to have that second independence referendum. Is there anything Liz Truss, forgive me, can do to stop her?
Yes, so there has been some suggestions, some media reporting in recent days that there was a government ally of Liz Truss, as it was quoted by the Sunday Times, that they were actually supportive of the idea of introducing a referendum act where you would stipulate some conditions before an independence referendum would ever be allowed to happen. One of those conditions was perhaps 60% of support for independence in the polls for at least a period of a year. So the sort of situation that would require quite a big upturn in support for independence. Another of the proposals that was talked about was if there was a referendum, perhaps you could change the rules so that half of the electorate needed to vote for independence for it to happen, rather than half of the turnout in a referendum. These were hugely controversial comments that were heavily criticised by the SNP, but there isn't any indication that this is actually the view of Liz Truss. Indeed, as I understand it, she simply thinks that there shouldn't be a referendum under any circumstances. She made that pledge to Scottish Conservative members at a hustings that if she became Prime Minister, there would not be an independence referendum. So I don't think she's looking at the circumstances of allowing it. I think she is simply saying it's not going to happen.
Political editor of the Scottish Daily Mail, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Well, we're just showing their pictures outside Downing Street. Just to remind you, Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister for today at least, but there is a new leader now of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss, with an extremely busy day tomorrow, she heads up to Balmoral to meet the Queen and officially ask permission to form a government.
So she's now Conservative Party leader, and we can listen back to Liz Truss's speech when she was announced as winner of the Tory leadership contest.
Well, thank you, Sir Graham. It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, my political colleagues and all of those who helped on this campaign. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support. I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates, particularly Rishi Sunak. It's been a hard-fought campaign. I think we have shown the depth and breadth of talent in our Conservative Party. And I also want to thank our outgoing leader, my friend, Boris Johnson. Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle. Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country. During this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And my friends, we need to show that we will deliver over the next 2 years. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. And I will deliver on the National Health Service. But we all will deliver for our country. And I will make sure that we use all the fantastic talents of the Conservative Party, our brilliant members of Parliament and peers, our fantastic councillors, our MSs, our MSPs, all of our councillors and activists and members right across our country. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
Liz Truss, the new Tory leader, and yet more changes in the past few minutes. Breaking news being reported by the Daily Mail and others that the Conservative Party co-chairman, Ben Elliott, has now resigned his position. One of two co-chairs, of course, the other Andrew Stevenson, who we saw introducing Liz Truss in that hustings, or the latest at the QE2 building.
You have been watching the very first edition of GB Newsday. And what a day to launch! A new Conservative Party leader, Liz Truss, will be handed the keys to Downing Street tomorrow when she travels up to Balmoral to meet the Queen.
Next up, GB Live with Patrick Christis. And the news headlines, of course, are Rosie, but we'll be back and see you tomorrow for yet more news. Stay with us.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook. A fine day out there for the vast majority, quite warm in the September sunshine. However, a few showers are developing and the downpours will take over overnight with some thunderstorms in many areas. This big area of low pressure is responsible, spiralling bands of showers across the UK. One clearing away to the north at the moment, but another one coming into the southwest. And it's for southwest England, parts of Wales and the Midlands, where we have a Met Office warning in place in this zone. Some big thunderstorms likely, dropping a lot of rain in a short space of time. But they won't stop there. They'll spread into northern England, southern Scotland through the nighttime period, and a few across the east as well. So nowhere really immune from the downpours, but many places will become dry through the early hours. Quite a warm night